here tonight to have some fun? Well, I wish the fuck you hadn't come to see me then. No. I just want to say something. It's great to be here. This is the third country that I've been in the past 10 days. We went to Scotland, we went to England, but of course we're finishing up tonight. And I've enjoyed the countryside. I think it's beautiful. But when we were coming into Wales, Diamond Dave was my driver. I'm surprised I'm still living. And we started looking at the road signs. He said, "Are we going the right way?" I said, "I don't know. Are we going to Fenellismist or are we going to Lindblum?" We got signs in one language in the States. We still can't figure the shit out. You got to learn 2 languages just to be able to figure out how to get to the grocery store. I don't know how you do it. So my hat is off to you, ladies and gentlemen. Are there any ladies here, by the way? What, a small... Who is this? Horton Here's a Who down in Whoville? Where... I'm terribly sorry that you have to be subjected to this, young lady. You wanted to come? Excellent. I got one female fan in Wales.
All right, well,
Dave, what should we talk about? Let me figure out. Hold on. We're so far away. Do I have any place? I'll lean this right here. Will that work? There we go.
There. Jim has an
Stay away from
with Sprite, I've learned.
Well, no caffeine. It's very clean, fresh tasting, no caffeine. I'm back on the sugar for this trip. Oh, I tell you, they've tried to kill me. They took me to Scotland and froze me. Between the wind and the rain and the cold freaking fucking weather, I got bronchitis. They had to take me to the doctor last week, as a matter of fact. It was like being dumped in a bucket of ice water and then put in a freezer. Just sightseeing in Glasgow. It's the coldest I've ever been in my fucking life. No wonder those people wear a lot of clothing up there.
Well, Jim,
I got a small smattering of giggles. Not a lot of Scottish fans in the audience, eh? No, it's a wonderful place. I spent a year there one time. It just seemed like it actually was overnight, but...
Well, it's interesting you were talking about Welsh names, because we've actually got a test for you tonight, which I'd like to start the show with. We're going to surprise you with this. Actually, we'll get... let Ben, you come back on the stage for me. I know I just sent you out there. Let's get someone...
He's just ribbing you now. You'll go back and forth.
Yeah.
Later, you're going to Nando's for us, right? Okay.
Jim's discovered Nando's chicken as well.
Oh, my God. It's so good. Your lips will smack your brains out. I'm going to go home to Kentucky and punch Colonel Sanders in the cunt.
All right, now Chris Roberts is here. Chris, for those of you who don't know, is the UK's premier referee. Chris, could I borrow you? Can we get you out? I know you got 4 people on your side there, but...
What? Now, okay, just all of you in that section, move over to this section. All of you in that section, move over to that section, and you people just watch them and laugh.
All right, now, somewhere in this pocket, I have a town name, which I believe, I've been reliably told by my Welsh friends, is the longest...
What have you got in your fucking pockets? Where did you get that suit?
Old bank statement. This is actually... If I tell you, you can't laugh.
I probably won't laugh. I don't laugh at anything else you say.
My uncle is actually an undertaker, like a funeral director, and he had a spare suit. So I thought, I didn't own one.
Yeah, I guess.
So there we are.
It seems like it would have been starched or at least a little stiffer than...
Oh, yeah, it's pretty well starched. Anyway,
yeah.
Chris.
By the way, who do you blame for your haircut? You want to stand up and show him... He got a haircut for the London show on Sunday. Just stand up and turn around. And
I cut my own hair.
He cut his own hair, but...
And it went kind of bad.
I've seen people with receding... Yeah. I've got a receding hairline in the front. Mine's going that way. I've never seen anybody's coming up over the top of their fucking...
All right, now, let's get... Ben, can you hold this end? Chris, can you come over here and unroll this name? This is the... Those of you who are Welsh will know this. Jim, you might need to come and stand around the front so you can see. All right. Now, this is the longest town name in the world, and it's a legitimate town in Wales, a Welsh name. So let's see if let's have Jim Cornette pronouncing the longest town name in the world. Go.
Lanfairpulligan Gulguguri Chirwer Nerbdop Will Antisala Gaga 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 Gagagich.
How was that? All right, now, the reason I brought Chris up is because he...
But wait, it's unincorporated. It's a small town, so... What?
Well, Chris is a legitimate, authentic Welshman. So I figured we'd have you actually give us the correct pronunciation so we can teach Jim a bit of Welsh here. Off we go.
I think my Welsh is worse than Jim's, actually, but we'll have a little go. Llanfai por Gwyngaeth go gerin chrendroboth Llantysilio go go go.
How about that? Thank you so much.
It got a round of applause, yes. Give him a round of applause.
Wonderful man.
I'll take his word for it. I'm not going to disagree with him.
All right, now, we have sent Ben back out into the crowd, and we are going to have mostly questions from you guys tonight. It's about you getting your chance to talk to Jim. But we are going to do one quick gimmick before we start. We did this in London.
There are a few topical things also that have just come up, so we'll
indeed.
We'll talk
With
about
the WWE Network, of course, launching yesterday. We'll talk about that in a minute, and the events from Raw last night, an eventful night in Green Bay. But before we do...
It's the first time those words have ever been put together in that order. An eventful night in Green Bay. I stayed in a hotel there one time. It was so small they stole my towels. I like that line. I really do. Also, I have another one. The town is so small, the town whore is a virgin. And one more. A tornado went through there last year, did $3 million worth of improvements. So, all right, that's enough of that. We're getting slappy, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, so before we get on to the current events, we're going to do a thing that we call the time tunnel. And for this moment in the show, we have spent all of our budget on a very special jingle. Go.
The time tunnel.
All right. You like that?
When we talk about we have spared literally every expense. We have spared literally every expense. That actually was a guy trying to turn his car over, and we just played. It was like backward masking, and later on it says, "I love Satan."
So, at this part in the show, we go back in time and ask you about a controversial moment during your run in either WWF or WCW. So on this occasion, I want to go back to June 1998, King of the Ring, Undertaker versus Mick Foley, Hell in a Cell. Obviously, a world-famous bump from the top of the cell by Mick Foley. You were involved with WWF at the time, right? Did anyone know about it? Had Vince McMahon authorized it? What's the deal with Mick coming off the cell?
Nobody asked him to do it. It was Cactus, and I always call him Cactus to this day. And I'm one of the only people that he lets call him still Cactus because we've known each other so long. But I just can't get it out of my mind. You know, back in those days, you didn't call guys by their real name. You called them by their gimmick names. And if you wanted to be friendly with Abdullah the Butcher, you called him Abby. But so I still call him Cactus. Anyway. Yes, several people knew about it. He came up with the idea, but he had to tell Vince, right? Vince McMahon, because, you know, Vince would have probably shit himself, which he's done on occasion, you know, if he'd have done that. But it wasn't like he put out a memo to the whole crew. So a few key people knew about it and knew what was going on. And Undertaker was one of the people, obviously. And Undertaker's response when he first told him the idea was, "You want me to what?" And then I don't even think Cactus realized when he finally got up there exactly how high it was, but we were at the Pittsburgh Civic Arena, which was the hockey arena in town, seats like 17,000, known as the Igloo. But that night in the middle of June, it was so fucking hot in that building. The walls were literally steaming and sweating, right? Especially back in the locker room, they didn't have great air. So Cactus goes out and he has that match, and that bump, as everybody knows, has been talked about, was not the one that got him. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't comfortable. It wasn't like falling into bed at night. But then the choke slam, when they continued further, the choke slam that was supposed to be on top of the cage that actually ended up going through the cage, Mick landed on the back of his head, his feet folded up over him, and the impact knocked him out. And also, at the same time, somewhere, the chair fell down then that came through the ceiling and fell on his face and knocked one of his teeth out, and he aspirated it up through his nose, so that's why you get the famous shot of what looked like a giant booger, but was in actuality one of Mick's teeth that he had aspirated all the way up through his throat, through his nasal passages, and it's hanging out of his nose. So it wasn't a good night for Mrs. Foley's baby boy. And Terry Funk then came in the ring. You've seen the match. Undertaker goes over and says, "See if he's still alive." And Terry goes over and says, "Mick, are you still alive?" And Mick kind of just looked up and said, "I'm not sure." So that's where Terry took the choke slam to give Mick some more time to come back to life, and he choke slammed Terry out of his shoes. And then Cactus was wondering, well, whose shoes are those laying there? He didn't remember Terry coming in. Finally, they got the match done and over with. They bring Cactus back, And it's so hot back there, and you can tell he don't know where he is, and he's bleeding, and he's got teeth in his nose, and he's fucked up. And I said, and he's got to do a run-in later on in the night. And I said, somebody, don't worry about his run-in. Get him to the office where they got some air conditioning so he can regain his composure. And he looks up at me, and he says, did we do the thumbtacks? He's got them still sticking in him. I said, yes, Mick, you did the thumbtacks. Go to the air. They took him to the air, the nurse, the EMT, they attended to him. He got back out and did the run-in. I have no idea how. But until that bump, I kind of thought I had the record, right? Because the scaffold match, they had replayed that on TBS over the years, time after time. Me, Jim Cornette, the fat manager, I had the most famous bump in wrestling history until fucking Cactus decided to get thrown off the fucking roof. I don't intend to try to top it. I will not be doing that. And I actually encouraged Cactus never to try to top it because how could you? And nobody else, I don't think, is going to do that. So I think his record is safe.
In hindsight, do you think...
in hindsight, none of us should have done any of that stupid shit.
So do you... I mean, I wonder whether there's, on a kind of serious note, is there like a generation of people who think that's the way to break into the business now? Do you think Mick bears some blame for any of that or not?
Well, a lot of people have tried to emulate some of the things that he did. And... That ignores the fact that Mick Foley is just a tremendously successful, intelligent, talented, articulate guy, the way he uses words and language, the way he was always able to do his promos, the way that he was able to work psychologically, and he knew how to put things together. The bumps were what got him noticed because he didn't have the body and the physique and, the great athletic ability that some people have or the way to display it. He has his great ability in his own right, but... the bumps got him noticed, but then his talent came out. And that's what a lot of people in the business have overlooked, is that they just try to go out and fall off things or be thrown off things, but they're not just as talented and intelligent and articulate and likable. It got to the point where people didn't want to see him punish himself anymore. And when Dude Love came around, he even came to me one time, he said, Corny, I feel like, the people I'm shortchanging the people. And I said, Cactus, it's to the point now where every time you take one of these bumps, instead of because they didn't really want to see you hurt yourself, and they know it hurts. So now you're entertaining them a different way, and they still are happy, and they got smiles on their faces. And you're like, okay. And then he'd go out and go, whoo, mercy, Dude Love, Steve Austin, you're just like cheap toilet paper. You don't take crap off anybody. And it would be a big a hand as if he'd had just come off the roof. So it gave him a little bit of longevity, and he could intersperse different things in there. So I'm glad he did that because pretty soon we're going to have to get a spatula to carry him to the back after every one of his matches.
All right, so let's fast forward to the present day. We are, just over 24 hours, 36 hours maybe, into the launch of the WWE Network. Now, do we think that has been... is that going to be a stroke of genius? Is it going to be the death knell of WWE? Where does it stand on that scale?
Well, I don't think it's going to put them out of business, even if it doesn't work. The WWE, everybody in the States knows, has more money than our federal government. Vince is probably going to be loaning Obama, spending money here in the next little short period of time. I think that the network is going to change the way that the WWE does business. But once again, I think that's part of the problem with the wrestling business overall is that now it's gotten so big. The WWE is so big. And, of course, a lot of us may think that it's kind of watered down and sanitized and pasteurized these days. But it's gotten so big, nothing can knock them out of business. But it's going to be interesting to see how people take to this change. They're asking people to pay a lot less money for the same things they're getting now, but they're asking a lot more people to pay that lot less money. The lot less money is a good idea. It remains to be seen whether they can get a lot more people. And they're on the right track, bringing back as many guns as they can for WrestleMania, but it just remains to be seen whether they're striking a chord with the wrestling fans that they really want to see this stuff enough to, commit to the network for the long haul. And so they're bringing back everybody they can bring back. I have a feeling Vince would probably resuscitate some dead people if he could to get them on WrestleMania this year, but we'll see what happens.
On that note, Hulk Hogan.
Okay. Well, as a matter of fact, they put the clear, they brought Hogan back from the dead, or TNA as we call it in America. So we shall see what happens. At least we won't look at the leg drop this year, because if Hogan was to do the leg drop, he would shatter like, he looks like Uncle Creepy with a slight build,
Now, we were talking in the car on the way up here, right, about how...
You were talking. I was trying to sleep, but...
Well, for a change. We were talking about Hulk Hogan in the car and how the news of him coming back broke earlier than I think WWE wanted on TMZ.
Well, yeah, see, here's the thing. Hulk Hogan makes a deal with Vince McMahon, right? All of a sudden, instead of the WWE announcing it, it's TMZ, our gossip site in the United States, that announces it. Who do you think leaked that? Think about it. Hogan loves publicity worse than a sick man loves penicillin. So I'm thinking that as soon as he made that deal with Vince, and Vince is thinking, I'm going to get to, break this on Raw and Monday night, all of a sudden TMZ gets a phone call. Hey, brother. It's Terry from Tampa. I got a scoop for you, brother. So TMZ breaks the story, and Vince, who's paying this guy however much money the first time they get back together in all these years, and he's got to go, oh, by the way, as you heard on TMZ, I'm sure he was not happy. But at the same time, I think Hogan leaked his sex tape. Because, they said that Bubba the Love Sponge kind of had the camera in the bedroom and didn't know about it. Nobody knew about it. No, you've heard about this, right? And hey, what's a little wife shagging amongst friends? I'm not one to judge. I have no, moral turpitude toward that. But I think it's only fair that if you're going to videotape a friend of yours banging your wife, you should at least let him know he's being videotaped, so at least he could be cut in on the royalties. But maybe Bubba was a little short that week and said, well, we could sell this tape. But I don't know. Maybe I think Hulk might have leaked it just because he could prove that even though he couldn't drop the leg, he could still let something go down.
Now, there's a couple of other stories coming out of Raw last night, one of which, apparently, I didn't realize this, I thought it was just selling really well, but apparently John Cena may have been hurt when he got attacked by the Wyatt family last night. What's your take on that as we go into WrestleMania?
I'm looking, because our internet time and service is kind of limited at the hotel, but I was looking at one of the news sites, and they said that it was reported that Cena really got hurt. The knee was really hurt, and they took him out on a stretcher or whatever. Now, once again, it's wrestling. And maybe for once they've actually fooled us, and I hope I don't wish any ill on John, because I like John. John's a great guy. But how shitty must that luck be? They said that one of the Wyatts picked him up by one leg while the other ones were beating on him, and his knee went out or whatever, is dislocated. We don't know how serious it might or might not be. But right before WrestleMania, Vince has got to be going, why did I kick that old gypsy woman? Why? But shit like that happens. We were talking when I mentioned that. I said I was there the night in Corpus Christi in 1990 when we did the Clash of Champions, and Sting was turned on by the Horsemen, Ric Flair and Arn and Ole Anderson, who at that time were baby faces. This had been a month-long process. Flair was the booker. I was on the creative team with Kevin Sullivan. And we were building up Sting to be the new guy that Flair would pass the torch to. And, of course, we had made a deal for Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson to come back from the WWE. And then, of course, Jim Herd, who was running WCW, managed to fuck that up and wouldn't hire Tully back. The story actually is in my book, The Midnight Express. It's on sale, 25th anniversary scrapbook on sale up front. I highly recommend it. We have a few takers, but it's wonderful toilet reading. But anyway, so when Tully couldn't come, they got grumpy old Ole to come back and fulfill the Horsemen, and they brought Sting into the fold. It was a babyface group, and this ran for a couple months, and finally the big night comes on live national television, the Clash of Champions. They're going to turn on Sting, and then when Flair and the Horsemen are in the ring, in the cage at the end of the night, Sting's going to come out, climb the cage, dive off the top of the cage, do whatever the fuck he's going to do. He's going to make a big impact, and he's going to the pay-per-view a couple of weeks later. He's going to win the world title from Ric Flair right in the middle of the ring. Sting runs down there, starts climbing that cage. The security guys, including Doug Dillinger, former Charlotte, North Carolina Police Department, they get a little too fucking antsy with pulling Sting down. They jerk him down. He lands on one leg and blows his fucking knee and drops like a turd in a punch bowl. On live television, Jim Ross and I are doing the commentary, and you can tell he's hurt, partially because of the way he's screaming in fucking pain. I'm like, I couldn't say, oh, shit on the air. You can say shit here. That's another thing I like about UK television. You can say shit on television just any old time. So it's just funny. When we get Gordon Ramsay, his shit is bleeped, right? Which means half the show is beep. You get to hear Gordon in all his shit-covered glory. But anyway, so Sting is down. JR and I sign off. I run in the back. Flair's already there. They're carrying Sting in. Did I mention he was screaming in fucking pain? And we're like, what the fuck do we do? We know he's fucked an ACL tear. I've done both of them. The scaffold was this one. You're out for months, right? So Flair says, we're all going to drive on, our separate rental cars and things to the next town that night. And he's, nope, stay over. We got to have a booking meeting in the morning. We got to figure out what we're going to do. So I canceled my car, stay over. I'm going to fly the next day. I get to the airport. Rick, when we having this meeting? I'm still thinking about it. So I went, by the time we had the meeting, I would have been there anyway in the car. We have the meetings. We're going to turn Luger babyface. And we're going to put Luger in the main event at Wrestle War. But I can't put the title on him because I promised it to Sting. And this meant a lot to Rick at the time. So he had the match with Luger, which was another case where Luger came up like the spare prick at the wedding and didn't win the fucking belt. And then it was not until July that Sting was able, this was February, not till July that Sting was able to get back in the ring and wrestle and actually win the title from Flair, and Flair put him over like he had promised to. But by then, Jim Hurt had run Flair out of the booking job. He had quit. Then he'd run me off the booking committee. I had quit. I think Flair was almost about to quit at that point, so Sting never really got the run that he deserved, all because Doug Dillinger was too forceful in jerking him off the cage and crippling our main event superstar in the twinkling of an eye. So it can happen. So let's keep our fingers crossed for Cena. I don't know. Some of you may like John. Some of you may not. I know a lot of people say we're just like this. This is him, and that's Cena. But I like John. He trained with us in Louisville, and he's a stand-up guy. It's the direction they want to take him. So I tend to look at the person and say, hey, he's making $15 million a year. I'd probably kiss a lot of babies too. Especially between the ages of 18 and 24.
All right, there's a lot more about Raw. I don't want to give spoilers away for people who haven't seen it, but Brock Lesnar was up to something last night, which we'll maybe talk about later.
Okay,
some people have to put
I got some Brock for you later on.
Yeah, okay, but now in the meantime, what I think we'll
Brock Lesnar.
Oh, okay.
Well, that was apropos, wasn't it? He's got a finger on a button back there.
All right, so we are going to talk about Brock. What is your opinion of Brock Lesnar?
Here's the thing. I can't take anything away from him as an athlete. He was an NCAA heavyweight wrestling champion. He's performed at a high level as a pro. He tried out for pro football, American football, and almost made it despite never having played football before. It's almost unheard of. It's just that he's a genetic freak. And then he became the biggest. No, he is. He's a genetic freak. He's amazing. His strength, his speed, his explosiveness, power, everybody that sees him in any pro sport is gobsmacked by his athletic ability. But at the same time, in Louisville and OVW, we trained him when he was first getting in. We used to call him Block Lesnar because he's a fucking meathead. His head is as goddamn thick as his chest. Sometimes things don't fucking get through. Brock was a farm boy. He'd been a college jock. He'd always been catered to as the star athlete in his little small town, and then later on when he went to college, and he wasn't used to being told what to do. Or at least in as succinct a way as we in the wrestling business tell people what to fucking do. And also, he had a problem. He would respect the coaches, but the referees and the ring boys and, whoever he thought was beneath him, because he was a star, he would push around a little bit and manage to offend all of my referees, most of my managers, some of my friends. And I didn't think also that he was trying his hardest. Even in his book, he glossed over his days, over a year training in Louisville from scratch in about 2 pages because he didn't like Louisville. He thought it was beneath him. He thought developmental was beneath him. He was making $250,000 a year to go to school. Anybody here like that sometime? The other guys were making like 50, and they were happy to be there. I didn't think Brock was applying himself that hard. And son of a gun, when as soon as he gets up there and they're paying him a lot more money and the spotlight's on him, then he immediately starts trying a lot harder. I felt like I wanted more effort out of him for the money he was being given and the time we were taking with him because he wasn't a wrestling fan growing up. He wasn't a natural performer. I teamed him up in a tag team with Shelton Benjamin, who was a natural performer and a wrestling fan growing up and was exciting. Brock was as boring when he first started out as a fucking mud fence, right? But I said he pissed off my managers, my ring guys, my referees. He also managed to piss off my wife. My current wife, she's my girlfriend then, Stacy Cornette, the queen of the castle. And it was really a stupid thing, but because she, she was one of the boys, she was willing to put up with things, but she went in one night and the finish of most of her tag teams matches versus Brock and Shelton was that she would take a press slam from Brock, and that got a big response from the crowd. Well, she went in one night and she told him, look, and this is what we do in the wrestling business when we got a bad knee or a bad arm or a bad shoulder, whatever. We say, hey, watch the knee, watch the shoulder, watch the arm, watch whatever part is hurt. In this case, she said, watch my pussy. Because she had just recently gotten both sides of her pussy lips pierced. It was like 2 days beforehand. I see small snickers of, possibly you've seen these things. They are quite cute adornments, really. And plus, you can put dangly things on them and different colored jewels, and it makes it quite festive down there. So she tells him, watch my pussy. I just had my pussy pierced. Don't fucking, get too far up in there. And he says, all day. He starts saying, as soon as I go for the press slam, I'm going to squeeze that. Brother, don't do it, I'm telling you. And she's got a high tolerance for pain. I've seen her kick the shit out of some guys. But so all day he's saying, I'm going to do it. I'm going to squeeze it. And all day she's saying, don't do it. Well, goddamn, when he goes for the press slam through accident or fucking on purpose, he squeezes the pussy. Boom, she takes press slam. She comes back. She's hot. She's got her whip. She's going to beat this meathead's fucking ass, right? He comes back. She's like, motherfucker, I told you not to do that. You said you were going to fucking do it. Hey, fuck it. So I hear in the back, I'm in the production room. I hear all this, fuck you, fuck you. I go back, and there she's 5'3", and she's fucking looking up like this, fuck you. And he's looking down, I didn't do it on purpose. I said, what the fuck? And she said, he squeezed my pussy. And he said, I didn't do it on purpose. And she said, he told me all day he was going to fucking do it. And she said, fuck you. And he said, fuck you. I said, hold on. You can't say fuck you to her in front of me because I will have to shoot you in both kneecaps. He was astonished to find this out, right? He even went to Danny Davis later on and complained. He said, why did Jim say he was going to shoot me? And Danny said, look at you, you big motherfucker. Who's going to fight you on purpose? You better learn right now that if you get somebody pissed off, they're going to go straight to the fucking ammunition and not worry about throwing a punch because nobody's going to fight you. They're going to shoot you. Now, he was kind enough to say he would just shoot you in the knees where you might be the shortest fucking world champion in history. But at least you would still be breathing, but just some asshole on the street is just going to shoot you in the fucking head and see if it penetrates that fucking skull. So anyway, I had to call them together for the good of the locker room, and you should have seen Brock shaking hands with the 5'3" girl that was pissed off about her pussy. But they both said they were sorry because they were professionals. And then he went on and made a lot of money and bailed on the business like we thought that he probably would and tried to do a bunch of other shit and did until he had his problems. And now he's come back for a lot of money. And I have no sympathy because he's a great performer, but he's also taken up a lot of room that a lot of wrestling fans that really wanted to get into the profession and wanted to excel rather than just doing it for a payoff every once in a while. He's taken up their room, in my opinion. Brock.
All right. Now, before we move on.
Brock the pussy squeezer. No good pussy manipulator. But it is really festive down there, especially at Christmas when she put like green and red things. And the mistletoe.
The last 3 shows, Mrs. Cornette has been here, and we haven't heard this story. I wonder why.
It just came up. She decided to stay and take the ferry today. Not Joel Ross, the boat that goes across the...
Before we move on, and I apologize, there is going to be a mini Raw spoiler now, so earmuffs if you don't want to know. But we do now know who Brock Lesnar is fighting at WrestleMania as of last night. It is The Undertaker. He's challenging the streak. What is your take on that match and what it will do for WrestleMania's buy rate?
I think that they better hope a lot of people want to see Brock Lesnar against The Undertaker. That's what I hope, because if Cena is hurt, and you've told me a few of the other matches they've confirmed, and of course, Daniel Bryan, now wants Triple H instead of the title. He wanted the title for months. Now all of a sudden it's like reverse psychology. I will tell the fans that I want Triple H. That way they will want to see it. Do you want to see it? Small groans. I think they better hope that a lot of people want to see Brock Lesnar and The Undertaker. And I'm excited to see Brock's shoulders go down for the 1, 2, 3. Because, no, here's the thing. And everybody's talking about Undertaker comes back once a year and he still wins. Shouldn't somebody end the streak? At this point, The Undertaker is an icon. He's the one guy that's always been there. He's done what's right for business. He's a locker room leader. All the guys respect him. He doesn't show up impaired. He doesn't play ha-ha with the booking. If he doesn't like it, he doesn't take his ball and go home. I've seen the guy work when most people would be in a fucking hospital. He's a big attraction. And for what he means to WrestleMania, it's a feel-good moment. At this point, if somebody beat him, would it get that guy over? Or would people just go, I don't know, I kind of really wanted to see that. I think it's great as a promoter. If I had The Undertaker working for me once a year and could come back on a big show and sell a bunch of tickets and stand there for the WrestleMania moment with all he's done for the business and always helped other guys behind the scenes that a lot of people don't even know about, I think he deserves it. And I'm going to love to see him tombstone that fucking blockheaded moron that's made a lot of money off this business and never really done anything for it in return. And I'm going to love to see him fucking do the one, hand on the chest, 1, 2, 3. I think that's only fitting because Brock's part-time and Undertaker's part-time. But as I say, Undertaker may even be a prick, but he's our prick, so he deserves it.
All right, now we really are going to go into the audience. I know it's been a while. Let's, Ben, where are you?
And this looks like a surly bunch. Please don't become a mob.
Ben, you're out there. I see you.
And will you please collect all the knives also? At least I'm in the UK. I don't have to worry about getting shot. But right. You guys look mean enough to insert the bullets manually.
All right, so Ben, if you're over in this part, anyone in this part of the audience, if you want to put your hand up, if you have a question you want to ask Jim about anything at all.
Oh, so you don't have to walk. Okay, it's going to be one of those nights. Yeah, just.
What's your name, sir?
Hi, I'm John. In your opinion, who's better, Kurt Angle or Shawn Michaels?
Oh, God. Right now, Shawn Michaels, despite the fact that he was a flaming uncircumcised prick at the time. No, what do they call him over here? A bell end? Was that work over here? Yeah. Well, and Shawn was a bell end with a giant clapper. Shawn was the best in-ring performer of the 90s. Just like it was Flair in the 80s, as Shawn Michaels, no doubt about it, in the ring as a performer when he wanted to be, was the best performer in the 90s. At the same time, he was never an Olympic gold medalist. And Kurt Angle could tie him in more knots, but he could put a ham sandwich on Shawn's back and starve him to death. Kurt's a legitimate beast as a wrestler and as an athlete, and Kurt was also, along with The Rock, one of the quickest guys that I've ever seen. You don't get that good, that main event level, that quick in this business. You just don't. But both Rock and Kurt did. And I would have to say that Kurt probably for a while there, until now, he's feeling the effects of his injuries. I would say Kurt probably took Michaels' spot there toward the beginning of this, the decade of the 2000s. So it depends on the era. You can't just say, but overall, I mean, for his body of work, Shawn, and this is the only time you're going to hear me saying good stuff about Shawn Michaels, so I'm glad we got cameras here that nobody will believe it. But in the ring, he was one of the best of all time. Outside the ring, I couldn't warm up to him if we were cremated together. So,
do you think Kurt versus Shawn WrestleMania 21 is that the greatest WrestleMania match of all time?
Well, and once again, as we've gotten toward the most recent decade, I've sort of tuned out a little bit. One of my favorite WrestleMania moments was Austin and Bret Hart in that I Quit match, the double turn. I thought that was probably my favorite modern WWF match, where it could have fit in the 80s in the Carolinas in an NWA territory. The guys that really looked good, they were tight, they were snug, they were bloody, the people were going crazy. That's my favorite. But, Shawn and Kurt was one of them. Undertaker, Michaels, you can go on, not far, but you can go on.
All right, let's get another question. Ben, where are we now? Okay, we're still over here. So another question from this part of the room.
Yeah, don't make Ben have to walk, guys. He's had a hard day.
Hey, Jim, long-time fan, download the podcast as well. I'm just wondering why you haven't invited Bowling on the tour.
Well, because he required 2 first-class plane tickets for his left side and his right side. Has anybody seen pictures of Star Maker Bowling? You've heard his audio, but Kenny topped out last Christmas at 570 pounds. And, when I knew him when we were kids, we were about within 10, 15 pounds from each other. He took off and left me. So finally, they put him in the hospital, and actually he was retaining fluid, and they drained 80 pounds off of him in 2 weeks. And I had made a bet with him he couldn't lose 100 pounds. I said, I'd give you $1,000 if you lose 100 pounds. I didn't know they could put you up and drain 80 pounds off of you. He came out of the hospital, went on a diet, lost 21 pounds, asked me for $1,000. I'm like, you cheated. You had a tube stuck up your dick. I did not know that you could actually lose weight that way, or I would not have made that bet, because I would have known that he would have taken me up on it. But yeah, he needed 2 first-class plane tickets, and also I was afraid finally, after that whole fucking debacle with George Bush fucking y'all into goddamn getting into our stupid war, we finally kind of got halfway babyface with the United Kingdom. I didn't want to bring bowling over here and ruin that whole fucking thing.
All right, Ben, where are we? We're over this side now. Any questions over here?
I'm a big Vader fan. I just want to know, can you set the scene for me from your point of view for the SummerSlam 96 main event with the triple finish?
Oh, God. Shawn Michaels did not like working, and here we go with Shawn, the real guy. He didn't like working with Leon because Vader was Vader. When you went into a match with Vader, you knew he was going to be stiff and he was going to hit you hard and you're going to get beat up and jerked around, but he wasn't going to injure you, right? Most of the time. But Shawn was not used to the level of physicality that he was feeling from Vader. And one time, I think it was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Vader even rolled out and he was almost in tears, right? Because I'd seen Shawn talking to him, because Shawn's big at just, when he gets mad at somebody, as you saw in that match, he'll just fucking scream it out in the middle of the ring instead of waiting to go in the back. I said, what did he say to you? He said, he told me if I ever pulled his hair like that again, that would be my job. You know, it just, fuck. So then all of a sudden we had a gentle Vader who was walking on eggshells around this fucking little pussy. And so the matches didn't transpire as much. But now in SummerSlam 96, in that finish, when Michaels, the supposed best worker in the world, got a hold of my racket, Jesus H. Christ, you'd have felt like he was hitting you over the head with that sledgehammer that Triple H carries around. By the way, that's a real believable finish, right? If I hit anybody here with a sledgehammer, we're calling the fucking Undertaker. The real one, not Mark Calloway. But this moron thinks he can get over by hitting people with a sledgehammer. Anyway, Michaels is whack, whack, whack with the fucking racket. I'm Jesus Christ, knots on my head faster than I can rub them. But that was another one where Leon was supposed to move on the elbow, and Shawn comes off and redirects in midstream and lands and goes, move, and kicks him, move. He was just a big temper fucking tantrum thrower at that point in time, and the whole program with Vader kind of got sabotaged because of it. And I think Vader could have been a tremendous asset to the company, but he was taken out of the main event picture and re-racked a few times and didn't get over like he should. It wasn't his fault.
Okay, Ben, another one over here.
Okay.
Anyone else? No questions? There's one back there.
Okay, yeah.
Hey, Jim, real simple question. Who was better, Bobby or Dennis?
Oh, my God, a real simple question. All right. Who's your favorite child? And they're standing here in front of you so you can pick them out together. You know, once again, better. Wrestling is an art form. It's not a science. So it's subjective. It's not a thing that you can quantify, or, you know, there's no equation. It's like, what's the greatest band, the Rolling Stones or the Beatles or the Who? What's the greatest painting, the Last Supper or the Mona Lisa? It's art. Bobby, when Bobby and Dennis first got together, had never really wrestled outside the Tennessee territory, even though he had been a pro for like 7 or 8 years. He started when he was 15. And he was a natural. He actually started out putting the ring up as a teenager, and if they got it up early, then he and his friends could get in and kind of play around. And the guys started noticing, wait a minute, this kid from Huntsville that sets the ring up, holy shit, you know, he's good. And they started booking him, and by the time he was in his late teens, he was in the main events for Nick Goulas, the Tennessee promoter. Dennis had started 5-6 years previously, had been a variety of places. He was kind of the ring general. And with the you know, their version of the Midnight Express at the time, and of course I was a rookie, so I was just happy to be anywhere, especially when I saw Bill Watts' paychecks. I'm like, fuck, this is great. But Dennis would kind of lead the matches and tell us where we were going, and he was very good. The things that people don't understand about Dennis was he wasn't as flashy as Bobby. He didn't come off the top rope and hit all those incredible maneuvers, but if you go back, and especially the recent Mid-South Legends DVD that they released, on that video, there's a lot of great talent, but a lot of them were starting out early. Ted DiBiase, Hacksaw Duggan, JYD was a great personality, but never exactly a great in-ring technician. If you go back and watch that video, probably the best, most consistent performer in the ring all the way through was Dennis Condrey. He was always in the right place. He had perfect body language. His shit looked good. He could do everything well. Nothing maybe outrageous, but everything well. And he was the guy that kept the matches together because even the Rock and Roll were very young and mostly inexperienced back then. So he was the general, and he doesn't get the credit that he deserves. But Bobby then obviously blossomed and flowered and went on to be one of the greatest performers night in and night out in the history of the business. And he was so good, I've talked about this earlier this week, that even Ric Flair, when Flair was booking WCW, wanted to work with Bobby, wrote that match down because it was an honor for him. He'd never had a single match with Bobby Eaton, ended up having 2 of them on television for the world title because it was a thrill for Ric Flair to get in the ring with a guy who was as talented as Bobby Eaton. And that, to me, says something, and I don't know, it may be the only time that Rick has ever actually been fired up to wrestle anybody, especially somebody, that was primarily noted for being in a tag team situation. So Dennis had the head, Bobby had the heart. They were all parts of the, what made the Midnight Express special.
Today on Facebook, Tammy Sitch, also known as Sunny, posed a question to ask you. What was the entertainment at your 4th of July barbecue in 1993?
We had actually, in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, we had a thing we called Fan Week because we had started to get some attention since we were one of the last territories in the United States. A lot of the fans across the country, we even had a few come from the UK a couple of years. We would have a week where the fans could come in and they could stay at the hotel in Knoxville and they could travel the circuit and go to all the matches with the wrestlers and see all of our, our shows that week, our TV taping. And also we did a dinner with the baby faces because baby faces usually are a dry, non-personality bunch, right? So we figure a couple hours for dinner, you've seen them, right? But the heels usually have more personality, so we had a cookout at the state park up the road from my house, and we had all the heels there, and the fans were there. And there was this one guy named Marty Gorman, and he was from New Jersey. And people from New Jersey, you don't have anything like it here, so I won't even try. But he's a little slow, and he was sitting there with a baseball cap on, and Tammy was talking to him, and he was in love with Tammy. It was not reciprocated, right? Marty couldn't have got a date on a tombstone. But he's sitting there wearing his baseball cap, and Jimmy Del Rey of the Heavenly Bodies is smoking a cigarette behind him, and he starts ashing in the top of Marty's cap. And then as Tammy's talking to him, Sonny, she starts saying, "It's getting warm out here, isn't it, Marty?" Yeah, it's getting kind of warm. And meanwhile, Jimmy's ashing on his cap. So finally, Jimmy we're at a cookout. We've got the starter fluid for the grill. I don't know how this happened, but Jimmy decided to get starter fluid and squirt it on Marty Gorman's cap. And when he did, it caught one of the cinders from the cigarette, and his whole head burst into flames. Marty did not realize this was going on. We have it on videotape. He's sitting there, his hat is on flaming fire, and he's still talking to Tammy. And Tammy's going, "It's really getting hot now, isn't it, Marty?" "Yeah, it is getting hot, but you're just so beautiful, Tammy." He thought he was sweating because he was horny. He was sweating because his head was on fucking fire. And then finally we had to put it out, and then he noticed. He's like, "Oh, I just got that hat." I have no finish for this bit, so I'll take a small bow. I don't, I'll do what. Bobby Fulton of the Fantastics, I was talking to him on my podcast about this a few weeks ago. He set my pants on fire one time in Washington, D.C. while I was still wearing them. I had those old polyester pants, right? They used to wear the bright colors. And I go in the stall to take a piss in Washington at the D.C. Armory. And he thinks he's going to rib me. He balls up some toilet paper and sets it on fire and throws it under the fucking stall thinking that I'll go, "Oh, my God, it's on fire." Well, no, it's already, the heat's on. It's the middle of winter time, so I'm sweating anyway. It's real hot and stuffy. I'm taking a piss, and he threw it behind me so I didn't see the flaming fireball until it touched off my pant leg. And then all of a sudden I look down, and suddenly my pants are on fucking fire up to my knee, and I'm trying to get out of them, and that shit melts. Polyester melts into fluid, so if it gets on you, it sticks, right? So I'm trying to and I fucking come out, throw my pants down, and he's laughing. I said, "Okay, Jolly Joker. I've got an extra pair of pants in my fucking suit bag," right? I go put them on. They're wrinkled, but it'll do. He decides he's going to get over on me finally. So he takes the pants, right? And he goes out to the ring, and when he comes out, where Midnight's already in the ring, and here comes Bobby Fulton. He says, look at here what I found. I found these back in the locker room, Jim Cornette's pants. And I said, yeah, Fulton, I know you've always wanted to get in my pants. And Tommy Rogers standing there going, I told you not to do this shit. Another time we're in Louisville, Kentucky, my hometown. And Bobby Fulton grew up watching the Sheik's territory in Detroit where they always fought and it was wild and brawling. And he decides since he's coming out to the ring to fight the Midnight Express, he grabs a big shovel, right? A big fucking shovel, like he's going to come out and wail away at us. And as soon as he comes out, Tommy's once again, he's saying, don't take it out there. Cornette's going to say something. Don't take it out there. He takes the shovel out there. As soon as I saw him coming down the aisle, I grabbed the microphone. He gets in the ring. I said, what's the matter, Fulton? Your tag team partner's not housebroken? Tommy's like, I told you not to bring that shit out here. Anyway, there you have that.
Okay, right. Now, I think what we'll do at this point is go back in time again, if we can.
Do we have the jingle again?
So
or
I'm hoping we do. So I'm just, let's see if we have it. Here it is.
There it is.
The time tunnel.
It sounds like the opening of a Prince song, doesn't it? Tan, tan, tan.
And then
I was dreaming when I wrote this. Maybe they were actually drunk when they wrote this format that we're doing here. But
now,
please also be sure drink heavily. It does help the show.
The Midnight Express. We talked a little bit about them already.
I've heard of those guys.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, throughout the week, we've been hearing various road stories with those and other guys. You told me on the way today that there's a story, I think it's about Stan Lane, right, involving cheese that you hadn't told yet, and you wanted to save it for tonight. What is it?
We haven't told this one yet because we're trying to make a lot of the stories different on the tour. But the guys were always notorious ribbers, and you had to play with the guys you were riding with or you were in the locker room with because we saw each other more than our own families. And so we were always together and either in the locker room or in the car. And I was fortunate because Bobby was a fun-loving guy. Dennis is a hilarious guy. People don't know it outside the business, but he is to talk to. But Stan was always the party guy, right? In more ways than one. You've heard Mick Foley's got the story in his book where he would actually learn about life by taking a glass and putting it up to the wall of Stan's hotel room. He'd see him go in the front door with 4 bottles of baby oil and a candle and go, what the fuck, But Stan, even before he got to be part of the Midnight Express, he was part of the Fabulous Ones. He and Steve Kern were a great tag team. And when I tell this story, I won't mention who else was in the car with Stan because some of these people may still be married. They wouldn't be after the story was heard. But Stan was with a couple of the other Memphis baby faces. This might even have been before the Fabulous Ones got together. So if Steve is looking, don't sue me like Hogan and Bubba the Love Sponge or whatever. But Stan was with a couple of baby faces in the car coming back from Jonesboro, Arkansas. And there was this noted fan in Jonesboro, Arkansas that liked to ride back to Memphis with the guys so that they could save the price of the hotel room. So Stan's in the front seat, right? And somebody's driving and somebody's in the back seat with the young lady. And as Stan has stopped at a convenience store to get snacks, I don't know if you have it here, Cheese Whiz, but it's canned cheese. It sprays out of a spray can, and it's a cheese dip, and you put it on crackers. And it's very tasty. Oh, now don't look at me with those faces. I went to Scotland. I saw haggis. I found out what's in that after I ate some. I don't know what horrible creatures you people slaughter and eat around here, so don't judge us, our Cheese Whiz, because we're Americans. But anyway, as the guy in the back seat with the girl is having a wonderful conversation with her feet are up in the air, and her panties are dangling off of her left ankle. And Stan sees that and takes that Cheese Whiz and reaches up and sprays some of that Cheese Whiz in the crotch of the panties. Then he taps the guy on the shoulder, and the guy's turning around. He's like, busy. Taps him again. Busy. Taps him again. Points to the crotch of the panties. The guy goes, finished his activities for the night. Monday morning, went to the doctor, was concerned that he had something wrong with him. The doctor says, why do you think that? He said, well, I kind of just know. And I think they gave him some penicillin and a couple of shots, and I don't think Stan ever ate Cheese Whiz around him again, but that's, yes.
What about Bobby Eaton has a notoriously queasy stomach?
Bobby, yeah. The thing that nobody knows about Bobby is that He can be in a match for an hour where guys will bleed all over him. They hit each other with chairs, garbage cans, anything. Don't talk to him about boogers. Bobby has the queasiest, easiest stomach in all of wrestling. If you walk up and say, Bobby, here's a booger. Blah, he will vomit at any point in time. Stand one time in the car, KFC, you got it over here. You know the gravy. It looks like wallpaper paste. But at the same time, Bobby had just had a couple of kids. So we have some KFC. We're eating in the car. We're driving down the road. And then finally, we didn't want the gravy, leftover gravy, to spill on the carpet. So Bobby says, I'll throw it out. He throws it out the window. The wind catches it and brings it back all over his steering wheel, all over his lap. Stan Lane looks at him and says, Bobby, that looks like baby shit. Anything. You can talk about things. You can put an idea in his mind and it will make him vomit, and especially sounds and noises. So one night we're all four in a car, Bob Eaton, Stan Lane, Big Bubba Rogers, the Big Boss Man, and myself. Bubba is sick. He's like I am now. He's got a chest cold, right? I'm starting to get a little bit of it because it's cold weather. We've been on the road for a while. Stan's fine. Bobby's fine. He's in the back seat. I'm driving. Bubba starts coughing. He starts coughing. He starts bringing up some phlegm. My God, it sounds like a farmer trying to whip a cat in his throat. As he starts doing that and the phlegm starts going, Bobby starts going. Stan starts realizing what Bobby's doing, and he starts laughing, and he laughs so hard he starts coughing. Now Bubba's coughing. He's got phlegm. Now Stan starts coughing. Bobby's going. Now it's starting to get to me, too. I start laughing. I start wheezing. I start coughing. Bobby says, Corn, pull over. Bill Dundee's in a car following us back to the airport so we can get something to eat. All of a sudden, he sees our car veer over to the right-hand side of the road. We pull over on the fucking emergency lane, and all four doors open at the same time, and all four guys in the car get out and start vomiting on the side of the road on cue. Dundee's like, what the fuck have they done now? And it was all from noises. So Bubba finished his, Stan finished his, I finished mine. Bobby was still going. He's the only one that's not really sick or tickled, and he's the one that's still puking. But he had a wonderful wonderful talent for disguising his weakness in the ring with blood and all that stuff. But if you show him a booger or baby shit, Bobby Eaton will puke immediately.
All right, let's go back to the audience. Ben, where are you?
Ed Ferrera.
Ed Ferrera.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I thought that was like, I guess I don't even really need this. I don't know. Ed Ferrera was Vince Russo's paper carrier and assistant jock sniffer. And they hired him. This was the first TV writer they hired. So Ed Ferrera can be seen as the man who broke the glass ceiling. Whereas before he was hired to be in a writing position in the WWE, you actually had to know something about wrestling, and you actually had to have a wrestling background. He managed to be the one to break that trend. His credits had included writing episodes of Duckman on the Cartoon Network, and he had done some reality television, which, as everybody knows, bears no resemblance to reality. And he also had taken 6 whole lessons at a wrestling gym in Los Angeles, just so that, he could have a background. And he liked to fucking think that he was some kind of Emmy Award-winning writer, and that, you could write wrestling television like you write just scripted TV shows, and that's why I thought that he was a dumb fucking asshole. Because he's the one that was behind, we talked about it, I was ranting about it the other night, he was the one behind the Marlena miscarriage. When Marlena was supposedly pregnant, then got knocked off the ring apron and lost the baby. And finally, I went up to him one night when I basically just had to know. I said, why was this a good idea? Did this sell any pay-per-views? Did this sell any tickets? Did this get anybody over? Why would you do this? Oh, well, they do it in any other primetime drama series. Well, motherfucker, this ain't a primetime drama series. This is not Steve Williams plays the part of Stone Cold Steve Austin. We have credits and everything, although they'll probably get there. I said, if people believed she was really pregnant and then she had a miscarriage, then that's a distasteful thing. For all the guys in the audience, if they're girls or or wives or mothers, anybody that had happened to them. That's obviously something they don't want to relive, nor the females in the audience. I said if they didn't believe that she was pregnant, now we're just saying these unsavory things to just get a rise out of people, and I don't see what good that is. Well, I guess we'll just have to agree to disagree. Well, I guess we'll just have to agree to disagree, and I'll agree that I won't punch you in the fucking face. That was 1997. In 2000, I attempted to punch him in the face. Now, here's the thing. After this, and then I was gone from the writing team, and then blah, 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 and then they went to WCW because, of course, Vince Russo convinced Eric Bischoff that he had served the second course at the Last Supper and that he was very important in the WWF's Attitude Era. So they hired the idiot for about twice what Vince was paying him. And then he, of course, had to bring Ferrara because elsewise who's going to sniff his jock and carry his papers? So Ed Ferrara had a thing that he liked to do in production meetings to tickle everybody where he would make half of his face droop and he would fucking say bad things about Jim Ross, who has not only been a longtime friend of mine, but somebody I respect utmost for his ability and his talent and what he's done for professional wrestling. And here's this little sawed-off fat fucking runt making fun of a nearly career-ending injury that Jim's had Bell's palsy 3 times now, and he's gone through hell with it, and he's fought back every time, and he's overcome it. And this guy's making fun of it, and they did it on WCW television, Oklahoma, to make fun of Jim Ross. So I had never seen Ed Ferrara since then until about a couple of years later. This was 2000, 2001. I was doing commentary for Burt Prentice, a promoter in Nashville, Tennessee, for his television program. And he called me up one day and he said, well, they're starting TNA. So I guess it was 2002. They're starting TNA, and the TNA announcers, because that's the only problem I ever had with Jeff Jarrett, loved him, loved his father. He started me, loved his grandmother. She really started me as a kid. But he likes Vince Russo, so he's got some problem up there that the elevator didn't go all the way to the top floor. Poor Jeff. Anyway, Vince Russo was not only going to be booking this fucking fiasco they call TNA, but also Ed Ferrara was going to be one of the announcers. So I told Bert, see, that's fine, no problem. Bert, I'm just visiting. I got my own company up here in Louisville. I come down to help you out if you want them to do the commentary. Oh, no, I want you to do my commentary because it's my TV. They're just sending those guys to practice. They got announcers for a fucking national television program that needed to practice. Okay. And they said, one of them's going to be Ed Ferrara. I said, oh, I got to punch him in the fucking dick. Well, that's what I was calling to ask you. Would you mind, coexisting in the same building with him? I said, all right, Bert, I won't hit him. I didn't say I wouldn't cuss him. I didn't say I wouldn't try to get him to hit me first. I just said I wouldn't hit him. So I'm standing there talking to the boys that night in the locker room, a bunch of people I hadn't seen for a while, and in comes this fucking idiot. Now, Ed Ferrara is a middle-aged, fat, white guy, right? But now to look cool, he has gotten fake dreadlocks down to his ass. He looks like a goddamn, Jamaican snowman. And he comes up to me and sticks his fucking hand out like he's going to shake my hand. He said, hi, Jim. I said, hi, jack off. I said, would you care to explain to me to my face why you felt the need to make fun of Jim Ross's Bell's palsy, a fucking illness that almost cost him his career, why you had to do that on national television, why that you think that he's got more talent in his little finger than you've got in your whole fat body, and you felt the need to make fun of fucking Jim Ross and a career-ending disability. Can you tell me that, you fucking asshole? Well, I've got respect for the... I said, you don't have respect for Dick. That's why you always sniff fucking Vince Russo's jocks, because the two of you are a bunch of assholes. You don't have respect for the people in the business or what anybody has done, and that's why you make fun of it. And then I spit in his eye. Because I did promise Bert that I wouldn't hit him, but I figure if I spit in another man's eye, he's going to do something about it. I spit in his eye, and he goes... And I said, there's the door. Do you want to go out back? Can we fight? This should be entertaining. 2 fat white guys having a fight. I'm not Ken Shamrock. I can't whip most people. Ed Ferrara, I can whip, right? He won't fight me. He lets everybody get in the middle of us. And I said, all right, then I spit in your eye and you didn't do anything about it. So I will tell this story forevermore. So now the story has gone to 4 different countries. And I really feel good about it. So if you see Ed Ferrara, ask him why he was such a dickless wonder that he would not do anything when Jim Cornette spit in his eye and called him out in the parking lot. If you took Ed Ferrara's balls and you rolled them toward a drinking straw, it would look like 2 kernels of corn rolling into a storm drain. Ed Ferrara. Thank you.
All right, Ben, where are you? Let's go back to the crowd.
I'm over here.
Any hands up over here? There we go.
Go on over here.
What's your opinion on Dave Batista?
Well, since he's come back, I heard he's had excellent fashion sense. You know, I understand bringing back a big name from the past. I understand a guy that was pushed at that level. There should be the nostalgia pop. Ultimate Warrior got it in 96. You know, Hogan gets it every time. It's just then, you know, Hulk Hogan's a household name, but so is garbage. And it stinks too when it gets old, right? But the nostalgia pops. But poor Dave ain't getting that much nostalgia, is he? He's not getting the love. But think about it. Once again, Batista's another one of the guys. We had him in OVW. He and Brock are the only two guys that I really knock from the OVW training classes because they're the only ones that I didn't believe loved the business, were naturals for the business, had innate talent for the business, and wanted to do it for a reason other than to make a lot of fucking money. And that's kind of been borne out, to be quite honest. And I don't think that Dave's getting the nostalgia pop because I don't think a lot of people are thinking back like, oh, remember that classic Batista match? Maybe can we give somebody a prize if they can come up with that classic Batista match? There weren't that many. And part of it was when he started training in OVW back in 2000, he was already past 30. He was injury prone. He was there in class for 2 weeks, tore his bicep, had to have surgery. He was not a natural performer. So we gave him a gimmick that we thought, I said, this guy has got to be in main events. I told him to his face, you can't be taking arm drags in the second match the way you look. So we gave him a gimmick that he could fight Undertaker or Kane or Big Show or the Giants. He'd have a limited window in the business, 5 to 7 years between his injuries and his age. That's about what happened too. I should be a psychic. And, you know, he never really loved it. And he said he's gone away because the PG direction. You know, if you love the business, you try to make it work until you just can't. And I don't see, especially with the money he was making and the limited demands on his time between injuries, why that it was really a burden for him to be in the wrestling business. But now he knows it's now or never, and he wants one more run, and the folks ain't working with him. And, you know, I don't know what to say. That's why I hope that they want to see Brock and Taker at WrestleMania. That's another reason, because they really don't want to see that fucking match either.
What do you think they should do about that? Because it seems like if it stays as Orton...
I think they should go home and rerun Mighty Mouse cartoons that day. Just, no. I don't know what you can do at this point. You know, just sometimes... We have a saying, sometimes the cake doesn't quite rise in the oven. Sometimes you pull that souffle out and it's flatter than 4 o'clock. And it's, you know,
but, I mean, surely
Dave Batista is a flat souffle. There's a good quote for the fucking documentary. Where's my, yeah, Dave Batista is a flat souffle. Now they'll just play that isolated quote, let them try to figure that shit out. What was he saying over there in Cardiff?
All right, Ben, where are you?
I'm still here.
Okay, we got a guy down here, but there's one there. You go to this one first, and then I'll come over here.
It's easier here, isn't it?
Hi, Jim. Can you give us some good Owen Hart stories?
Oh, my God. Should I do it now? Should I do it? And my favorite Owen Hart story, I've done. Nobody was here that's been to the other events. And my favorite Owen Hart story, because I've got to manage Owen and Davey as tag team champions and for quite a while in the WWF, and they were two impish pranksters. Owen was the master of the rib, right? Davey was his co-conspirator. And Davey's favorite quote, and I've been doing it to poor Owen, one of my cameramen, all week, was every time Davey would be confronted with the evidence of something he'd done, it wasn't me. It was Owen. I wasn't even there. Of course he was right there. They were like joined at the hip, but it wasn't me. It was Owen. I wasn't even there. But usually it was Owen instigating the thing. Owen was a master prankster. He would rib you at any point, but he was especially good on the telephone, right? He'd jack guys up out of their hotel room beds in the middle of the night claiming to be the front desk clerk. Sir, you've got to come down and pay for this room. I paid for the room. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, sir, you're going to have to leave unless you pay for it. What the fuck? Or he'd have them out in the breezeway looking for the peeping Tom that's been reported in the, in the vicinity. Why? Yes, we've had some calls, sir. Maybe you can see him just right around the corner. And he'd have guys out stumbling around going, I don't know where the fuck. So I knew he was a great phone ribber, and I knew he was a great ribber anyway. We had does anybody remember the famous angle where in 1996, Shawn Michaels was going to be defending the WWF Championship against the British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith. And to put heat on that matter, we came up with a deal Wasn't me originally, guys. I was just trying to work with it here, trying to be nice, Jim. But we came up with a deal where we would accuse, me and Davey Boy and Davey's wife Diana would accuse Shawn Michaels of moral turpitude because Shawn had been hitting on her and trying to molest her and trying to take her away from Davey. Shawn Michaels, of course, the innocent, all-American Shawn Michaels, who would never do such a thing. We were going to find out later on that it was all a plot by us dirty heels to smear his good name. But in the meantime, we did the promo on Raw where it's me and Davey and Diana standing there and Vince McMahon's holding the microphone. This is before he became Mr. McMahon, and at least we got him off television. As a commentator, that is. He would just do his segments, which he's a great heel, and it's not a stretch. He just wasn't the greatest commentator. So Vince is conducting the interview, and we're confronting Shawn Michaels, and I said a few things that had never been said on not only WWF television, but also on the USA Network. For example, I kind of channeled being a Southern Baptist preacher. And I said, Shawn Michaels, you have tried to make this lovely flower of Calgary womanhood break her marital bonds. You have tried to touch her in most unsavory of places and mitigate her private parts. You, Shawn Michaels, you, sir, are a fornicator. It's in the Bible, right? So I felt like I could get away with it. Vince starts looking and goes, nobody's ever said that. But then you can see kind of on his face, he's like, I kind of like it. Michaels don't know what to fucking do. I'm not sure he knew at the time. He was not reading the Bible then. He was pulling it out of the drawer in the hotel and chopping lines up on it, but he wasn't. Of course, now, since then, he's been born again. I maintain that's because people were not fans of the first time around. He had to try it again, but nevertheless. So anyway, we accused Shawn of all this. We did this big interview. The next week on Raw, I'm back in the locker room or the pre-tape room. I'm going over some paperwork, and in comes Davey and Owen. And Owen's in front, and Davey's following him like this. They're doing this, and they're carrying a red telephone, like one of those old-fashioned desk phones. And it's obviously like one of the backstage building intercom phones. It's red like Commissioner Gordon would call Batman on, for one thing. It's got no dial on it. You just have to pick it up and go through the switchboard. And for another thing, it's not even... The cord is around the corner of the door. I think it's not even plugged in. I see Owen Hart, the master of the phone rib, carrying this fucking jack-off-looking phone in. I'm thinking, okay, what's this? Jim, phone for you. Who is it? It's Stu. Now, it helps that Bruce Pritchard, also one of the Jolly Jokers in the WWF, does a great Stu Hart impersonation, right? So I'm going to work with him because it's a slow afternoon, so I pick up the phone. All right. Hello? Jim? It's Stu. Hey, Stu, how are you? What can I do for you? Well, I'm just wondering, I've been watching the TV, and you're making this angle up with Diana and Davey and Shawn, and you're making Diana look like some kind of whore. So, well, Stu, it wasn't my idea. Well, in man is wrestling is just that we get the kids in school up here in Calgary, and they're going to school with Diana, their mother, is looking like some kind of whore. So, well, Stu, I was against it, but you know whose fault it is. Who's that? I said, it's Bruce Pritchard. It's all his fault. I said, Bruce Pritchard is one of those sexual deviants. He's a pervert, Stu. I'm telling you, he goes to all those adult bookstores. He's got those things in his bag that they use with the batteries. I said, oh, my God, he goes to the peep shows where we have to mop the floor up afterwards. I said, he's a real pervert, and he's thought of this whole thing. And I always thought Bruce was such a fine boy. But he's come up with this stuff. It's making Diana look like some kind of whore. So, well, Stu, if I were you, I'd call Vince. Because I'm telling you, yeah. I'd call Vince because, I wasn't in favor of it. I'm just doing what they tell me. But Bruce, that's all he thinks about. That's sex and dicks and pussies and things. So if you call Vince, I'm sure he'll take care of it. Well, I'm going to have to do that because... I think Bruce, but we just can't have Diana looking like some kid of whore. All right, Stu. Well, I appreciate talking to you. I got to go, okay, thank you. And boom, hung up. As soon as I hang up the phone, I look up at Owen and I go, who the fuck was that? And a second later, around the corner, the other way from the phone cord, around the corner of the door, carrying papers, obviously oblivious to everything that's been going on, is Bruce Pritchard. And I looked at Owen, I said, who was that? He said, it was Stu. Bruce says, what's going on? I said, nothing. Nothing. Move along. There's nothing more to see here. Return to your homes. Next week, the angle was cut off. I don't know whether Stu called Vince. I don't know whether Vince called Bruce in to ask about mopping up the floor at the Peep Show. I don't know what the fuck happened, but I do know that that was the last time that on WWF television we ever made Diana Hart look like some kind of whore.
All right, last question for this half, if I can stretch over here. What's your name, sir?
It's Paul.
All right, Paul, what's your question?
How was the NWA angle in '98 presented to you? Was it sort of, because it felt like it could have went somewhere once Dan Severn came in and everything, but...
Oh, yes. Yeah. Well, it wasn't presented to me at one time. They kind of snuck it in on me. Sort of like the doctor when he gives you the exam and he sticks his finger up your ass. He doesn't just go whole hog with it. He fucking eases it up there, so by the time that you really realize, hey, the whole fucking thing's up my ass, it's too late. That was the NWA angle in 1998. They shoved it up there, but not quick enough before I realized until, oh shit, this whole dick is up my ass. As a matter of fact, when I went to the doctor in the UK, or in England last week, it was so refreshing because he was so gentle. He stuck his finger up my ass and had both hands on my shoulders while he was doing it. I don't know how he managed to... But at first it was just supposed, I can't even remember what happened first, but it was dribbles and drabs. With Dan Severn, I'd even given them specific notes because I knew Dan. I'd worked with Dan. Dan Severn was an Ultimate Fighting Championship winner, Triple Crown winner, future UFC Hall of Famer, one of the most decorated amateur and professional wrestlers that the United States had ever produced, 100 national, regional, local championships in wrestling over his whole life. What an athlete. But he was not the most exciting son of a gun in the world. You see, you got a bridge named after him. I didn't even know he'd ever been over here that long to really get over like that. So there were things you could do, and he wasn't a great promo, but he was legitimate. And also, Ken Shamrock was in the company. So I figured we never had Severn Shamrock 3 in the UFC. And they were the ones who set the early pay-per-view records before John McCain, one of our crackpot Republican fucking politicians, fucked UFC, said, we can do Severn Shamrock 3. There's so much we can do. I gave him notes on how to build the guy, but Russo, a man who, if he was ever caught in the men's locker room, would be whistling Stranger in Paradise, would rather, have Blue Meanie painted blue and dancing in fucking tutus and everything and crackhead dwarfs from the Howard Stern show than actually push a real athlete on a wrestling program. Imagine that. Controversial idea. So they gave me Dan, but then they took him away, and they brought the new Midnight Express in. Oh, God, took that away. They brought the NWA talent in, some of guys who had been major box office attractions in the past, but weren't familiar to the WWF audience, and they didn't do anything to get them over. They had them fight each other. And then I gradually realized that it was a rib on me because when I'd been doing those promos in 97 and early 98, we want our wrestling back. The fans in the buildings, when they would play it on the screen, would be cheering me. So in another case, Russo thought I was going to be a heel for being an old fuddy-duddy stuck in the past because they want his glorious sports entertainment. No. When I would say, I'm sick and tired of all this tomfoolery, we want to see our real wrestling back. We want to see wrestlers having wrestling matches, not all this sports entertainment crap. The people were cheering, and he got hot. So he figured the best way to make them not cheer is to show that all this fucking old fuddy-duddy wrestling shit is fucking rotten. So that's what they did. They managed to showcase everything and everybody in it in such a way that they accentuated all their weaknesses and meanwhile neutralized all their strengths. And then finally, when they broke the new Midnight Express up, Bart Gunn and Bob Holly into that fucking Brawl for All thing, I took that opportunity to go tell Jim Ross I'm retiring as a manager. Thank you. Thank you and good night. Be sure to tip the waitress. I'll be over here. And I was done.
All right before we go for our interval here and let people go to the bar.
Yes, please go to the bar. It does help the show.
Before we do that, the Iron Sheik.
Oh, my God.
He's just one of my personal favorites. Like, his Twitter account is my favorite thing on earth. So what can you tell me about
Which shows the
Ryan?
sheltered life that you lead. I tell you, Shiek was with us in the late 80s in WCW when they brought him back in for a brief period of time. Actually, an old fuddy-duddy booker who was stuck in the past, George Scott, thought that the Shiek could still do in 1989 what he did for him in 1977 and got unpleasantly surprised, but they signed Iron Sheik to a $100,000 a year contract because he was a big name. They wanted to make sure they got him locked in, right? And after like 2 months, they fired George Scott and they sent Sheik home. We'll just let him ride out his contract. We'll pay him. He's done nothing wrong. Once they sent him home, they forgot he was sitting home. His contract rolled over. They paid him $100,000 for another year. Now, meanwhile, me and the Midnight Express, because we didn't like Jim Hurd, the guy running the company, we're working every night. We're stealing a show every night. We're having 30-minute matches every night, pay-per-view, whatever the fuck, we can do it, right? Every night. Our fucking notice comes in right on time. Registered, mail, secured, signature, delivery. Sheik, they just forgot about, so they paid him $200,000 for 2 years to wrestle for 2 months. But while he was there, he was a source of inspiration because he came in one night in the locker room, and the guys have been out at the bar. And he says, "Oh, last night I cannot believe. I go to bar. I sitting at stool. I having Shakespeare's. And suddenly, I get up, go take piss. I come back. There is this bitch on my stool. I tell her, this is Sheik's stool. You must leave. She tells Sheik, piss off. I tell her, no, you don't understand. This is Iron Sheik, former WWF champion of the world. You must get off of Sheik's seat. She tells Sheik once again to piss off. I grab her by the arm, give her short clothesline. She fall down from stool, go boom. What a cunt. So I got my wife, which she liked the story years later, I got my wife a T-shirt that said Vata Kunt, VOTAKUNT. And she's wearing it like, she wears it like after we'd go to the matches and everything, and we'd worked, we'd just get dressed, and she was wearing that, and we went into a place that's a restaurant called Shoney's, that they have a lot of those in the southern United States. Fine microwave cooking. I'm telling you, you know, when you get the takeout, you can tell how good the meal is by the amount of grease dripping through the bottom of the bag. But they had a nice breakfast bar, so we go in, she's wearing this shirt that says Vata Kunt, right? A giant church group is on this side. But on this side, not only the manager, but all the people working there are gay. So it was kind of like the church group, the gay group, matter, antimatter. If they meet, it's going to explode, right? The manager sees her shirt and says, "Oh, you're a cunt, I'm a cunt, we're all cunts here." The church group over there going, "Oh shit, we need to pray some more." And I'm like, you know, maybe can we just have a couple of pieces of pie to go and we'll get the fuck out of here. So we had to retire the shirt. It's up on my office wall now next to whoever asked tonight about my WrestleMania 10 outfit. WrestleMania 10 outfit, Vata Kunt T-shirt is right up there on the office wall.
All right, I'm sure there's lots more questions, but we've got to go to a break. We'll be back in about 15 minutes' time. But in the meantime, ladies and gentlemen...
You're rushing me off. All right.
Jim Cornette!
Thank you, guys. I'll be back. I promise.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've already had an hour and 20 minutes. Let's have another with the legendary James E. Cornette.
I got to tell you, I don't know if you know this, but they're filming Doctor Who behind the building. Now, don't just rush up and leave. But during the break, we went around there. I tried to get in the phone box, right? They didn't like that too much. Well, I was thinking, you know, there's some things I'd like to do over in my life, and if I just popped in there for a minute, but Doctor Who opened the box and said, "Who the fuck is this?" And, you know, usually people say that my shows are like a veritable who's who of professional wrestling, but in this case tonight, it's been a veritable who's that? You know? But anyway, we're ready for round two, right?
Yes, we are. Okay, now we're going to start with the second half with, I just can't get enough of these stories about ribs on the road and all that kind of stuff, that pranks that have been pulled. What else have you got for me?
Well, I like to say there was a lot of rib stories in the Midnight Express book, but there was one I didn't put in there specifically because I didn't want to get sued by one of the offended parties. But Dennis Condrey was one that was involved in it. He gave me permission to tell this in a foreign country because the other guy will probably never hear about this because we're not filming this or anything, are we? Oh, shit. All right. But before Dennis Condrey was a member of the Midnight Express with Bobby Eaton, he had a partner in Tennessee for years named Phil Hickerson. And Phil Hickerson was a big old fat-bellied, ugly, rough, raw-boned country boy from Jackson, Tennessee. And Dennis at the time was quite a bit younger. So he was kind of slender, and they both had bleach blonde hair because all the heels in the 70s had bleach blonde hair. And they were a main event tag team, one of the best I'd ever seen. And they went around all the Tennessee territories for years, being the champions, being in the main events. They were very good friends. But as the heels, bleach blonde hair, they had also the tights across their ass had big sets of lips, right? And they'd do the thing where the heels used to do, where when the baby faces would do something to them, they'd run and they'd hug each other, and then the crowd would get on them, oh, you're gay, and all that stuff. That was big entertainment back in the 70s. But also there was one of the wrestlers in the territory named Tojo Yamamoto. He was a Japanese wrestler. He was an icon. He'd been a babyface there for years because he'd been a heel before, and the people loved him. But he was also very homophobic. And in the matches with Phil and Dennis, he'd see him. Now, once again, Dennis and Phil were not good-looking men by any stretch of the imagination, even at that point in time, especially with the bleached blonde hair and the lips on their asses. And they did not look that effeminate. And, I like to say that they couldn't get laid in a whorehouse with a fistful of 50s. But Tojo was looking at him sideways, starting to buy into this. So Dennis Condrey was able to convince Phil Hickerson one night it would be a classic rib. Can you imagine the look on Tojo Yamamoto's face if when he comes from his match and comes back in the locker room, it looks like he's just almost caught us fixing to do something. And Phil's like, yeah, that'd be funny. Dennis like, oh yeah, here we go. So he convinces Phil Hickerson it would be a good idea for Phil to get down on his knees in front of Dennis, and Dennis to have his trunks down around his own knees, and it would be like Tojo had caught them just in the midst of preparatory blowjobbery, right? So they've even got somebody watching the ring to make sure when Tojo comes around the corner, they'll be all set. And Phil gets down on his knees, right? And Dennis is standing over him, waving his large schlonstger in his face. And now he says, what about this? Right as Tojo comes around the corner, have your mouth wide open, like you're just ready to gobble the knob, right? And of course, Phil wants to see the reaction on Tojo's face when he comes around the corner, so he's looking toward the doorway. He's got his mouth open. Imagine, by the way, this is a large cock. He's got his mouth open, but he's looking that way. So the guy gives the high sign. Tojo's ready to come around the corner. Dennis standing there with his tights around his knees. Phil's on his knees with the dick approximately this far from the mouth, and he's looking. And right as Tojo comes around the corner, Dennis grabs the back of Phil's head and shoves his dick all the way down Phil's throat. Said his tongue felt like sandpaper, right? Tojo goes, oh my God, no. Hickerson knows he's been had. He comes up off the ground. He starts chasing Dennis. They go out the back of the arena, 3 blocks down the street, 2 guys in spandex, bleach blonde hair with lips on their ass, running down the city street. One of them, I'll kill you, motherfucker. Didn't speak to Dennis for like a week. They had to ride together. Actually, they had ridden together. Dennis had to get another ride, but they had to wrestle together every night. But it took a while before the friendship was, because sometimes a blowjob can come between you and your friends in certain unexpected ways, and in this case, that's kind of how it happened. But at least Dennis found out what Phil's tongue felt like, and Phil knew not to open his mouth in front of cocks anymore. So everybody learned something. It was educational.
Okay, now, it's time once again, Jim, to go back in time.
I just tried to do that. They wouldn't let me in the goddamn thing. Do those things really work, by the way? I know your UK medicine. I went to the doctor and they gave me medicine, the same kind of shit that I get in the United States, but it was different here because it actually works. It makes you well. I'm not experienced with that, in medicine. So I'm wondering, do you have the technology for a time machine?
Well, I don't know if we have the technology for a time machine, but we do have the technology.
The budget for a time tunnel.
Yes, and for a kick-ass jingle. Here it is.
The time tunnel.
I still think it sounds like Prince. I was dreaming when I wrote this. So I guess I should have wrote some better shit because you're not laughing. I know you're out there. I can hear you breathing.
All right, Starrcade 86 we're going back to.
Oh, God.
the scaffold match where you mentioned it briefly earlier, the match where you were famously injured. So take us back, and first of all, when you were told what the plan was for that match, what was your initial reaction?
Oh, shit. Was basically my reaction. I knew it wasn't going to end well, right? But I figured at least a lot of people are going to see it. The thing is, back in those days, we would get to the arena an hour before the matches started, and they would say, okay, you're wrestling so-and-so, and we knew who was going over, and that was pretty much all the prep we needed. But for Starrcade 86 was a huge event, and I'd only been in the business then about 4 years, and all of a sudden, this is going to be the first $1 million gate that the NWA has ever drawn, with a sellout in Greensboro and a sellout in the Omni in Atlanta. Both the shows happened. You'd have one match in the Omni, and then you'd see a match from Greensboro, and then a match from the Omni, and it was closed circuit all over the place. This was a big deal. So Dusty Rhodes was the booker at the time, and he brought all the talent into the office on Tuesday for the Thursday Thanksgiving night show and told us what was going to go on, because this was big and needed a lot of prep, right? So we had done scaffold matches before. They were invented in the Tennessee territory, and we had done them in Louisiana with the Rock and Roll Express, the Mid-South Wrestling territory, and drawn big record crowds. You know, you couldn't do much up there, but the idea was that somebody could potentially be killed, and this was something that was appealing to the wrestling fans at that time. They wanted to see us actually die, such as I'm doing right now. And so he calls us in, and he says, tell you what we're going to do, baby. What we're going to do is when the Road Warriors win the match, we know that's going to happen. The Road Warriors got to win because, for one thing, they weren't about to take that fucking bump, right? But the Road Warriors always won. We knew that. When the Road Warriors win, the Midnight Express, still a top team, got to have a lot of heat. So we're going to try to take their mind, I say the mind, if you will, off the fact that the Midnight Express has won this match, or has lost this match. What we're going to do is after Bobby takes the bump and Dennis takes the bump and the Midnight Express have lost, then they're going to see you. And I'm like, oh, shit. And Paul Ellering going to come one way, and Animal going to come the other way, and Hulk going to come the other way, and they trap you so all you can do is run up the scaffold. I'm like, oh, shit. And once you get up the scaffold and you come out in the middle, there's one of the Road Warriors there and one of the Road Warriors there, and you got nowhere to go but, yes, you guessed it, down. So there's a monkey bar, a ladder apparatus under the scaffold, so you can monkey bar and you can hang and be acrobatic and, you know, do stuff, which the Road Warriors didn't do, but Bobby and Dennis did. So I somehow figured out a way, and by the way, I didn't tell anybody about this because I'm thinking, oh, Christ. My wife was there at the time, did not know. I get down while the Road Warriors are closing in on me, and I even told Animal, who I trusted. I trusted both of them, but Animal was stronger. I said, grab my fucking leg while I'm trying to get over the side of this thing so I don't just fall off on my head, because I'm not, as you can tell, a goddamn gymnast. I don't even play one on television. So I get under there and I get the grip, right, and I'm hanging there. And what Dusty had originally said was, now what you do is when they trap you and you get down and you're hanging there in the bottom of the ring will be the Midnight Express, Loverboy Dennis Condrey, Beautiful Bobby Eaton, the World Tag Team Champions, the Big Bubba Rogers, the biggest man in the world, baddest man in the world, 6'6", 350 pounds, and they'll be down there. And what I want you to do is, as you're hanging there, just kick your legs out, baby. What? Just kick your legs out and drop, and they'll catch you like they catch the girl cheerleaders at the football games. Obviously, this did not sound like a fucking pertinent plan to begin with, but it's Dusty Rhodes and it's the booker, and I know I'm going to make a lot of money, biggest show of all time. Okay, I'll go with this. We get out there that night in the Omni. We get there plenty early. There was one thing different about this scaffold match than any other scaffold match we'd ever done before. They had a budget. Because they had a budget, this wasn't a 16-foot-in-the-air scaffold. This wasn't a 20-foot-in-the-air scaffold. This goddamn scaffold was 24 feet high, 8-foot sections, 3 of them, 24 feet, 21 feet off the ring. I look up, I said, the University of Alabama football team could not catch me coming off that thing. I will kill all of us. Searching for a plan B, I had seen on television the way the parachute jumpers, right? When they jump out of the plane, they float down on a parachute, they drop and roll to the left, I believe. So I told Bobby and Dennis, I said, just stay out of there. Bubba, you're a foot taller than I am. You're goddamn huge. Get your arms out like this, and I'll get my arms out like this. And when I drop, get under me, and we'll drop and roll to the left like the parachute jumpers. This is how desperate I was that this seemed like a good plan. I'm hanging there finally, and I couldn't even look, right? I still haven't seen the Omni yet. It's been almost 30 years ago. I couldn't look. I let go, and it's like I fell for 15 minutes. I hear the wind rushing by. It's like I'm on an open-air train. But at the same time, if you watch the video, I defied gravity. Bobby fell like this. Boom. Dennis fell like this. I fell like this. It's like they shot me out of a fucking gun. So Bubba's down there, and all of a sudden, when I landed, I blew this knee. It went sideways, kind of like that, like a flipper. You couldn't really see it on the video because it snapped back in place fairly quickly after tearing my anterior cruciate ligament and destroying half the cartilage in my knee. Fortunately, when I landed and flew backwards, Bubba, who was never known as an American baseball center fielder, had lost me in the lights, and when my head snapped back, it hit his kneecap and knocked me momentarily unconscious to save me the premature pain of my knee having bent at a 45-degree angle the wrong way. Once that I recovered and realized that a bone was probably sticking out of my leg, I looked down and it's not, but oh God, that fucking hurt. So I look up at Bubba and he says, Jimmy, and he had a real high-pitched voice. That's why Bubba never talked, by the way, because he had a high-pitched. Jimmy, you fell so fast. No shit. I'm hurt. Carry me. What a bump. That was great. Bubba, I'm hurt. I'm shooting. He thought I said I was shitting. I'm shitting too. What a great bump it was. Bubba. And plus, I can't do it with a chest cold. I can't even replicate this sound. It sounded like somebody had grabbed my balls and put them through a fucking wash wringer. I was way up. I mean, I was calling stray cats from the area. My voice was shattering windows. Bubba, help me. I'm hurt. And then he finally got it. He starts helping me out there. As he's helping me out, he goes, yeah, that was great. Yeah, it was fucking wonderful. It was lovely. Yeah. The next day I woke up, my leg looked like a grape on a toothpick. It was so swollen up, I couldn't even hop on the other leg. I had to have my wife go to the store, give me some crutches, get me a pillow. I sat in the back seat of the car. We'd called the doctor in Charlotte, drove straight up there. Every pothole was fucking misery, right? We get there to the doctor's office. He meets me. He says, oh, first we've got to drain this. It didn't sound like an appetizing procedure. It was not. They take a fucking needle with a syringe and stick it in the middle of your knee joint and start pulling it out, and here comes the blood. And he fills up a syringe. He fills up another one. Fills up another one. Finally, he just took the syringe off, left the needle in my knee, and starts milking it into a bedpan. He said, I've never really taken this much blood off a knee before. I said, I'm sure you haven't. Then he says, oh, we got some fat in there. I said, what, now you're knocking my fucking physical condition at a time like this? He said, no, that means there's damage. I said, oh, you think there's damage? And so then they told me, well, you've torn your ACL. At the time, this was almost 30 years ago. We can operate and reattach it, and you'll be in the hospital for a week, and you'll be on crutches for a couple months. In about 6 months, you can come back to work. I said, well, what's plan B? Well, we can scope it, and we can go in there because it's like a broom handle with all the brush, right? All that's brushing around at each other where it's torn, and it's just nerves, and that's why it's hurting. So we'll clean all that off. You won't have an ACL, but you can be back to work in a few weeks. I said, there's the plan, because in those days, we didn't get paid if we didn't go to work. So they cleaned it out. I still haven't had the ACL reattached. I have wonderful arthritis. Every time it gets cold, I'm better than the weatherman. I can tell you when cold weather's coming. But so he goes in and cleans it out, and I was off for a couple weeks, and then finally I came back on crutches because I made $10,000 that night for the payoff for doing that stupidity. I lost $7,000 over the next 2 weeks. That's what the boys got paid for working that I would have got paid if I'd showed up, but I didn't. And at the time, I was not sufficiently confident in my spot in the business after only 4 years to say, hey, Jimmy Crockett, you cheap motherfucker, give me some goddamn money. I jumped off a fucking scaffold for your ass on the biggest show of all time. I didn't say that. I just said it now. Jimmy Crockett, if you're watching, send me a fucking check. And then my insurance, which we have that over there because we actually don't get health care unless we pay through the ass for it. And then the ass bleeds, and then they charge you to cauterize your ass. The insurance didn't cover $1,500, so I lost $7,000 on payoffs. I lost $1,500 to the doctor's office, so I made $1,500 for the most famous bump of all time until Mick decided to get thrown off the goddamn roof, and then took that away from me too. But the moral to the story is, if you're going to do something really stupid and you know you're going to get hurt, make sure a lot of people are watching, because at least you have video and memories that we can tell on intimate nights such as this. I now take a small bow for being a really stupid motherfucker.
All right, I think it's time to take it to you guys again. Ben, where are you?
I'm over here.
Okay, let's. Who's got their hand up?
Ben likes to hang around that. Are you seeing the cameraman over there? Or?
Hey, Jim. Big fan. If you can give me any stories or expand on your whole run in the WF in '93 with the Heavenly Bodies.
Yes. Well, actually, that was kind of a strange situation, because the way that we did that, we were the only ones in 1993, Jim Cornette and the Heavenly Bodies were the only team to appear on both WWF and WCW pay-per-views while we were working for yet another company. Because when I established Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and Dr. Tom Pritchard and Stan Lane were the Heavenly Bodies at that time, they were my top tag team. It was originally going to be the Midnight Express, but they kept Bobby in WCW to languish for a while longer. And we'd made the deal with Bill Watts, who obviously I was close with and respected, giving us our first break, that we would come in, and we had some talent exchange ideas, and we did the Rock and Roll Bodies Smoky Mountain Tag Team title match on Super Brawl that year, and it was going to be the start of some things, but then they jacked Bill Watts around, another long story, and he went home not before, putting our deal on paper so that they didn't screw me once he left. So we actually got our money for that, but we weren't going back to work with WCW anymore. So we figured, okay, we've at least, while we're here in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, we've gotten publicity for the company and the championship by having a title match on WCW pay-per-view and appearing on their TVs a number of times. And then a couple of months later, Stan just really lost his passion for wrestling, and, he didn't want to end up, injured, broken down, because Stan's virility, not that he's ever had any problem with it. Jesus Christ. Oh, no. Stan Lane's dick will get hard enough to cut diamonds in an instant. I mean, it's like a goddamn laser pointer where there's pussy. Beep, 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 beep. But he decided to quit the business. So I needed a replacement. And Kevin Sullivan in Florida recommended this young man named Jimmy Backlund at the time, who became Jimmy Del Rey. He was a great worker, great wrestler, always wanted a break, but he had never really gotten a chance to get out of Florida. So I bring him in, and the way I introduce him as Stan's replacement after Stan lost the loser-leave Smoky Mountain Wrestling match was that Gigolo Jimmy Del Rey was the cousin of Dr. Tom Pritchard. They were family, so they were blood. They were thicker than water. And it also just so happened that on his first TV that Jimmy made, Dr. Tom Pritchard's real father, and Tom, of course, is Bruce Pritchard's brother, Tom's father came to visit us, and just to see him, do the TV. So we did a promo in the back with Tom Pritchard, Jimmy Del Rey, myself, and Tom and Bruce's father, where we had, just did some bullshit that we were going to send to Bruce, right? And we talked about, well, sir, Mr. Pritchard, do you have any other family members in wrestling? Things like that. He said, well, just another one. I got a boy up there, works for that phony group out of New York that does that cartoon stuff, but nobody serious like these boys, right? And we're ragging on Bruce, but I called Bruce and say, Bruce, I had your dad do a promo for Smoky Mountain Television, and he really put Tom over great, and he also put Jimmy over great. Oh, it's going to be great when we show it. And Bruce like, I'd like to see a copy. And I said, I'd like to send it to you, too. So I did. FedExed that fucking thing off, and I thought, Bruce, we're going to get a little ha-ha on Bruce. He calls me back 3 days later. He said, okay, very funny, motherfucker. I watched the promo, and I was not alone. He never told me who was in the room, but he was generally palling around with Vince and Pat Patterson at the time. So then he says, by the way, would you and the Heavenly Bodies like to make some shots up here for us? I said, well, yeah, we could. I said, but I don't want people to think that we're leaving, Smoky Mountain. It hurt my business, and we only available part-time. He said, that's okay. We need talent. We need new guys. We're rebuilding. Just for TVs and pay-per-views, and we'll let you mention Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Fuck, just to get the Heavenly Bodies and me, that sounds, I'll take it, right? All this national publicity. Now I'm thinking, okay, we're going to be on WWF and WCW TV while we're working for this little fucking hometown promotion in Knoxville, and they're both recognizing us. This will be great, right? We take the trip up to Raw. We get in. We set our stuff down. We go into catering. Hey, Bruce, how you doing? He says, Vince and Pat would like to talk to you. I said, all right. Now, at the time, I had been critical, as I have since been, of sports entertainment and the WWF philosophy, which I thought was always a little more ha-ha and a little more cartoony and funny, especially in those days, than the NWA wrestling, which had been serious and treated as credible and athletic and, balls to the wall and guts and everything. And so I thought maybe Vince was going to say, well, I've heard you said some shit, pal, about us or whatever. I didn't know until then he never watched anybody else's wrestling. Vince McMahon probably this day, when Ricky and Robert, the Rock and Roll Express, came in the first time, the only competition that Vince had for 10 years was Crockett Promotions, and the NWA and the Rock and Roll were their all-time biggest box office attraction as a babyface tag team. He didn't know which one was Ricky and which one was Robert. He didn't watch any other wrestling. So he says, good to see you, pal. We'd had one more meeting in 1986. That's really all we did. Good to see you, pal. Listen, sit down. Wondering if you'd like to do something for us. That's when he hit me with the idea, Yokozuna's American spokesperson. I didn't even know until I got to Raw that day at 3 o'clock in the afternoon that night I was going to be Yokozuna's American spokesperson. The deal, I think, in hindsight was they were looking for a way to get Luger over. He figured Luger would be the next Hulk Hogan for him. And to do that, he wanted to really build Luger up against Yokozuna in the big title match. And Yokozuna's manager at the time was Mr. Fuji, who, as we all know, was a great wrestler in his day and had been an icon in the WWF, but was not the greatest promo, let's just say. Fuji had been in the country 40 years at that point, still couldn't really speak English. So sometimes it happens. Look at the Iron Sheik. You fucked a cunt. So they wanted me to be the American spokesperson so I could cut the fired up promos to kind of get Luger over on the other side. And boy, it's going to be a great package. And of course, what am I going to say? In hindsight, it was yes. Bruce probably said he won't come unless you talk about his company because he's running it, and he won't come without his boys because he's loyal. Well, bring him on, pal. I can see him doing it. So all of a sudden, I'm now the manager of the Heavenly Bodies and Yokozuna's American spokesperson. That's when I got to go out and hug Bobby Heenan. And we had never gotten to work together before. I'd met him a few times. He was my idol when I was a kid. I stole a bunch of stuff from him because when you steal from one person, it's plagiarism, but when you steal from many, it's research. So I'd stolen a bunch of Bobby Heenan stuff I'd seen when I was a kid, and he introduced me and went over and above because that's the way Bobby was. He wanted to get other guys over. He wanted to do things right for business. He gives me the big hug, and then even the WWF fans who hadn't watched the NWA and didn't know who I was, automatically, if Bobby Heenan's hugging me, I must be a real fucking prick, right? A big bell end like Dick over here. So, I love you. Bruce Pritchard, by the way, I love you. So anyway, Bobby gave me the big hug, and I announced, the bodies and Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and also I'm Yokozuna's American spokesperson. I'm going to watch out for these contracts. And that was the way they got me into it. And then we built up till SummerSlam, and of course the payoff was, I thought, by the build-up, Lex Luger was going to win the title at SummerSlam. And so I'd even done an interview with some, newspaper or whatever where they said, well, is Luger going to win? I said, well, I'll tell you what, if he doesn't, he's going to look like a real plate full of piss, right? Then I found out the finish. They wanted to stretch it out till WrestleMania the next year. I'm like, oh, fuck, here comes the plate full of piss. And they did the thing, and Yoko rolled out and got counted out, and the balloons dropped, and everybody's going, what's that plate full of piss doing in the ring? And then by the time they got to WrestleMania, the bloom was off of Lex's rose, and he hadn't worked out like they wanted, or they didn't work out like he wanted, or whatever, and he never did win that title, but he still looks good for a plate full of piss.
Ben, where are you?
I'm over here now.
Okay.
Hi, Jim. You did just touch on it there a little bit, but I've heard in an interview recently you said that you would like to be remembered as the greatest manager, second only to Bobby Heenan. Can just tell us a little bit from your point of view what made Bobby Heenan so good?
Oh, God. And that's the full quote was, people come up to me all the time, and of course they probably want money, but they'll say, you're the greatest manager of all time, right? And I say, no, I'm not. I will accept number 2, and even that's debatable, but I will accept that. But the greatest manager of all time was Bobby Heenan. And from the time that he's the first manager I saw because I discovered Dick the Bruiser's TV show from Indianapolis. He had a territory right before I discovered wrestling on TV in my own hometown. It was a long, sordid saga, but I saw Bobby Heenan first, and he just, he had the gift of gab. He could talk. He could think on his feet. He was witty. He could be funny, but back then the managers were funny, and I learned this by being sarcastic assholes. So it's like if you tell, I don't know, if you tell a funny joke about somebody's fat wife, the person married to that fat woman doesn't like it. They don't think it's funny. Well, maybe some of you do. I can see some of your faces. But if you tell a really sharp joke about somebody that's close to somebody, they won't see the humor in it. So I always tried to be funny like Bobby was funny, where he was talking about their heroes and their idols, and he would get heat that way. But at the same time, then he could turn serious and get the point across. He started out as a wrestling fan in Indianapolis, putting the ring up, just like a lot of us did, photographers putting the ring up, etc. But he loved the business, so he stuck with it. And then gradually they asked him one day, would you like to be a manager? And that's why he got the name Bobby, from Gentleman Bobby Davis, who was one of the great managers of the 50s, headlined everywhere. And Bobby he had a natural knack. And he was a better wrestler, better worker than almost anybody he managed, except for like Nick Bockwinkel or Ray Stevens. I mean, just the really, top-notch guys. But I would see him, he'd go out and he'd talk all that shit, and he'd do all the funny stuff, and then when Bruiser would get a hold of him, he'd bash him, and he'd bleed, and he'd shoot him across the ring, and he'd take the upside-down bump over the top rope. I'm like, I love this fucking guy, right? And then when I got to meet him, just as entertaining and as funny as he was on camera, he's even more entertaining and funnier off camera. And I got a chance to work with him in, like I said, a short time in the WWF. Then he left and went down south, and I stayed. And then later on, right before his health problems got really bad, I got to do a series of interviews with him in Ring of Honor, and also got to manage against him a couple of times. And, it was a thrill for me, because this is one of the things that I've done, this UK tour, that I've done something for the first time ever. And I haven't got to do something for the first time ever a lot over the past few years, but that was something, all the things I've done in wrestling, I got to do for the first time ever, work with and against Bobby Heenan, and it was like one of those, I can cross that off my bucket list. And even in, Sal Correnti does these wrestle reunions, and he did one in 2006, I think it was, in Pennsylvania, where the match was Bobby Eaton, Dennis Condrey, and Stan Lane in a six-man tag with me in the corner against Dory and Terry Funk and Mick Foley with Bobby Heenan in the corner. First time, only time that match ever took place. And believe it or not, that was the first and only time that we have really had a tremendous argument in the locker room over a finish. Nobody could agree on the fucking finish because nobody wanted to win. No, I'm serious. Sal comes in and says, well, you guys... Midnight Express, you've been on 3 of my wrestle reunions. You haven't won a match yet. You got to win. We're like, what? Why the fuck would we want to beat these guys? Right? Nobody wants to see that. They want to see the Funk Brothers and Mick Foley win and Bobby, and we're the heels. We're supposed to lose. No, you got to win. So we all sit down, and we said, fuck this. We're not doing it. We're putting you guys over. And Dory and Terry were like, well, no, fuck. We got to do what the booker says, but, we don't really, what the fuck? And Mick was like, I don't care who wins, but I'm not beating anybody. And really, it was 6 legends in the ring and 2 legendary managers, and nobody wants to win the fucking match, right? So finally, we came up with the idea where, and this was selfish on my part, because here went another bucket list. Dory and Terry got me in the ring and first Terry ripped my pants off to commemorate 24 years before when he had ripped my pants off on live Memphis television without me knowing it beforehand. It was a rib on me. They didn't even ask if I was wearing underwear. He rips my pants off, and Dory and Terry get simultaneous spinning toe holds on me while Mick has fucking Sacco down my throat. And then suddenly Stan gets the racket and whacks Dory or somebody or Terry, and he goes down and, pin, and the crowd farts. You can hear crickets chirping, but they loved the fucking double toe hold Sacco thing, so that was our pop for it. But that's not only has that match never happened before or since, but also that's the only time in all of our years that we've ever had a serious argument about trying to change a finish because nobody in the match actually wanted to win it, which was refreshing to be involved with guys that were that professional.
All right. While we're on the subject of managers, and heel managers in particular, you've talked in your book and on podcasts and all kinds of times about how bad the heat could get back in the day, geez. Right? As in fans wanted to stab you sometimes.
And fart at us, apparently, from out in the crowd somewhere. Was it?
What's the most serious fan altercation you've survived?
Well, we talked about over the course of the tour about several serious fan altercations. We had riots in Tulsa where the internal affairs people at the police department investigated the cops because the fans got beat up too bad, but they were just trying to save our life. And we've talked about having to draw guns to get out of parking lots because people were mobbing us. And I even had somebody in a crowd one night when I made my way through the crowd after the match. The cops had surrounded us. They couldn't get to us, but I got back in the locker room, and my entire leg, all the way down to my shoe, was covered in vomit. Where, it brought up an interesting question. Is there somebody in the crowd that can throw up on cue, or did they do it at home and save it and bring it with them? I don't know. But there, every once in a while, there were some lighthearted instances also. We tarred and feathered Magnum TA on Mid-South Wrestling Television. Actually, it was molasses and feathers, so, we didn't want to go the whole way, but Bobby Eaton came out of his hotel room like a couple of days after that showed on TV, and fans had found out where he stayed, and they tarred and feathered his car. But one time, I was talking about this earlier, and one of the guys said, you ought to throw this in. We're walking single file. The cops are on the sides of us, and we're walking single file back from the match one night, and Bobby's in front, and then Dennis, and then me, and this old woman. And, cops are looking for guys with knives and things like that. They're not looking for old women. This old woman, as Bobby walked by, she just hauled off and slapped the piss out of him. Bam! And he turns around. He's like, oh, it's an old woman. He walks on, takes it, right? So she's 1 for 1, right? Here comes Dennis. Bam! She slaps him, too. And he's like, mother. Oh, and he walks on. I've seen both of these, right? I'm walking by her. She draws back again. Raise your hand up like you're going to slap me. I blocked it and poked her in the eye. Because I'm like, what the fuck? I've just spent 20 minutes out here getting beat up. I'm not going to let you fucking slap me in the face, you old bitch. If I'd have kicked her in the pussy and she'd have gone down, I would have got arrested. But nobody saw that. I was just like, oh, I was just waving at a friend. What's the matter with you, ma'am? But the fans used to believe this stuff because we made them, because we wanted them to, because that's the way that they came back repeatedly to see their hero finally triumph over these dirty, heels with no redeeming quality. You had to make them believe that you were, a fucking horrible person so that their hero could vanquish you, but they would take it literally. And I used to see all the time, not only in our matches, but matches when I was a kid, people would jump in the ring and they weren't drunk and they weren't just trying to get attention. They wanted to go help their hero. And this one night, I've got a tennis racket up on my wall in my office next to an Associated Press newspaper headline, wrestling fan knocked out at ringside. We're wrestling the Steiner brothers one night in Altoona, Pennsylvania. Altoona, there's a town for you. Suddenly, we'd done something, and Bobby and Stan had switched places or done something behind the referee's back. And as Bobby's out on the floor on the other side of the ring, this guy comes over the rail and goes for him. And he ducked down and he grabbed him. And, Bobby grabbed the guy in a bear hug, and the guy's trying to get Bobby's eyes and everything. And I came around the corner. My team is in need. And I whacked this son of a bitch in the head with the racket because, after all, he's the one who made the first move. Boom, right there, busted him open from asshole to appetite. And all we had was rental security, not even any real police officers. So finally, they come down there and they grab this guy and they take him out the front door. Now he's bleeding like a stuck hog. They take him to the front door and said, "You got to leave now," and turned around and left him. So we're finishing the match, or trying to. And I'm standing there at ringside, and suddenly Bobby in the ring says, "Look out." And I turn around. This guy looks like the Walking Dead. Looks like a fucking zombie. He's bleeding, and he's dazed, and he's confused. And not even for Robert Plant and Jimmy Page reasons. He's just dazed and fucking confused. And he's pointing at me. And now all the people are starting to get up and pull out various weapons out of their pockets. And Stan Lane says, "Sunset flip." And we put the Steiners over. Boom, 1, 2, 3. We scoot out that way. The guy falls over. Here comes security. We've been around enough of these situations to know, get the fuck out of Dodge, right? So we didn't stop to change our clothes. We grabbed our bags. We got in a rental car. Bobby and Stan put towels over their blonde hair. They're in the back seat. I'm driving. We leave the building. We're getting out of there, right? We go the wrong way. So 5 minutes down the road, we realize we are nowhere close to the highway. We got to go back the other way. We got to go back by the building. Shit. We pull back by that building. Somebody has called the police and said they're having a riot at the arena. They sent 6 cop cars. They sent 2 ambulances. They're loading the guy who apparently came back outside again and then passed out. They're loading the guy in an ambulance. The cops are everywhere. They have canine dogs. The only thing missing was the fucking chopper with the searchlight. We go right by the building again. I'm like, this does not look good. Come to find out, they brought the dogs in the arena. The Steiner brothers trying to play with them. The big German shepherd, hey, puppy, rah, rah, rah. Oh, yeah, we like that. And they're asking everybody, are you Bobby Eaton? Are you Stan Lane? Are you Jim Cornette? No, nobody's admitting to that, not in this building. So I'm driving at a nice steady pace toward the highway. I see blue lights behind me. I'm like, oh, fuck. But they think we're farther down the road. So they shoot by us. Boom. Can't find us. We go on to Philadelphia. The next day, I open up the newspaper. Wrestling fan knocked out at ringside. This guy was laid open like that. They fucking sewed him up at the hospital, blah, 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 whatever the fuck. And his story was he was innocently standing at the railing taking pictures when suddenly I, for no apparent reason, went over and began clubbing him over the head with a piece of sports equipment believed to be a tennis racket. And that's the story he gave, and that's the story that they believed, and we never went back to Altoona, and therefore that's why I'm still here able to share this story with you, not in prison, being married to a guy named Bubba, who obviously likes it like all the WWF fans like it raw.
All right, I want to go one last time down memory lane, just because I want to play the jingle again. Here we go. Time tunnel, let's do it.
The time tunnel.
It is 1996, and Vince...
All things are as they were then, except you are there.
Vince has already lost...
Apparently that television program didn't cross over the pond, or you would instantly been convulsed in laughter had you seen this like I did when I was a kid for many years.
All right, well...
Yeah, I'm interrupting you.
Yeah, it didn't work, so we'll just move on. All right, where was I? Vince has already lost Hogan, he's lost Savage, and now others as well, and now Nash and Hall have gone. What is the state of mind backstage in WWE? Did people think that this was going to be the
end? After Hall and Nash left, the state of mind was, oh, God, thank God those pricks are out of here.
So when WCW is starting to, in the subsequent months, WCW is hammering WWF in the ratings, were there people thinking that the company couldn't survive? What was the feeling backstage?
Obviously everybody was worried because at that time, not only had Turner Broadcasting owned WCW for 8 years in 96 and had never even turned a profit, but they had never mounted a serious challenge. And all of a sudden, after they signed Luger and after they signed Savage and after they signed Heenan and after they signed Hall and then Nash and Hogan, all of a sudden, well, wouldn't you know, gosh, they're getting big ratings because all of these guys that the American wrestling fans had seen as the biggest stars were suddenly on the other channel. And I don't know that Ted Turner got that much richer from 1988 to 1996. I think what it was that Eric Bischoff did one thing right, and that's that he was able to actually speak to Turner Broadcasting and convince them to spend some fucking money for once. Because we had always had great talent, we'd always had a great television show, but they treated WCW when they bought it in 1988 for those years like the red-headed stepchild, if that translates over here, an unwanted member of the family that you got to fucking feed him some scraps every once in a while, and you got to make sure he's got something to wear, but you don't really want him in the fucking house. And that's the way they treated the wrestling company. And then Bischoff, managed to talk him into loosening up some money, and also then he tripped on a good idea. Stumbled over it, and oh, why? There's an idea, the invasion angle. So all of a sudden, for the first time ever, it was like that the WWF was invading WCW, and that worked. The outsiders, that's the whole idea. Invasion angles always work, except when they're fucked up like they are every other time they've ever been done in America. So, yeah, everybody was worried, but at the same time, it created an opportunity for all these new faces because all the big name stars that Vince had created and that Vince had paid all this money to and that Vince had made stars had all said, thanks, Vince, fuck you now, we're going to go over and take this billionaire's money. So the other guys that were there saw they had a chance to step up. And that's why it was such an exciting time in the WWF because we were starting to get away slowly from, the silly gimmicks, the gobbledygookers and the plumbers and the, et cetera. And for lack of anything else better to do, Vince had decided to start letting some guys step up and kind of be themselves. And then, of course, Vince Russo took credit for everything, but he went way too far. But with guys like Austin, and even The Rock was just starting then, and the other guys that came up during that time, they saw the opportunity to take the lead by going out and getting themselves over and putting themselves in big positions. So it was a tremendous locker room. Most everybody, once Hall and Nash were out of the equation, the Clique liked to only put their friends over and only, work with their friends and make sure that their friends were in positions of power. But when you had real pros, and Undertaker led the company, obviously, in the locker room, but guys like Austin and those guys who were real professionals and who wanted to get everybody over, wanted to get themselves over, and they also wanted to get the guys they were working with over so it would do business, then you had a fresher look, and it was, Russo stepped in at a great time. And I will admit that he's had a few good ideas. Of course, sooner or later, even a blind squirrel will find a nut. But he had the two biggest box office attractions, The Rock and Steve Austin, that the business has ever known. They drew more money even than Hulk Hogan, coming up at the same time. They had a great, young, hungry, underexposed talent roster that wanted to get over. They had Jim Ross, the best announcer in wrestling. Then Vince McMahon became Mr. McMahon. And boy, what a great heel he is. You can't say he's not. And a network quality television studio to do these things and a national TV contract. It all came at the right time. And that's why I like to say Mr. Russo had a grand total of 2 years, and go back and look it up, from 97 to 99, 2 years success in his position in the WWF. Then he fucked Vince, didn't even have the balls or the guts to come and shake his hand and say thank you and give his notice in person. He called him from his home 80 miles away from the arena after he'd already made the deal behind Vince McMahon's back. And then he went to WCW and was met with complete indifference, total apathy, and a $60 million loss the last year that WCW was around. And then, of course, we've all seen what great things he's been able to do for TNA during his stints there. So, if you want to talk about a one-trick pony, that's Vince Russo. I've not been the most successful man in the history of professional wrestling, but I was a manager at a top level for a long time. I've run a couple of different companies that were successful for a lot longer than 2 years. And I've done other things that indicate that I've at least done some well-thought-of work in professional wrestling, and Vince Russo has 2 years where he took credit for a lot of other people's hard work, and then he's fucking floundered for the past fucking 15. So, once again, Vince, just blow me. Just blow me. If you're watching this, I know you are. Vince, I know you are in your little squalid room somewhere, wherever you're living now. You're watching this. You're living vicariously through Jim Cornette, because at least I've mentioned you and still talk about you, or elsewise people would forget about you. So I know you're beating off hearing the sound of your own name now. And you're thinking about how you invented water and air. Now you're responsible for everything that's ever happened good in the world, and how all that bad that happened you could have fixed if only you were more understood. I just like to say, suck my large throbbing cock, Vince. And please, one thing, don't spit, swallow. It's good for you, it's protein.
All right, we're going to do a thing now because we're rapidly running out of time.
No!
We still have a little while, but
all right.
We're not going to have time to cover
I
everything.
don't want these
obviously.
people to hit the stage and attack you, because then I'd have to go get some help.
Well, that guy will protect me, whoever. Yes. So we're going to have a little bit of democracy here. I'm going to give you three. Ooh. We just met. That's too far. We're gonna do a choice of three. So I'm gonna give you guys three options. After I say each one, cheer if you want to hear it. The loudest cheer is the thing we'll talk about. Okay?
Well, that sounds democratic to me. Wait a minute, is that a good word over here? Democracy? It sounds fair. How about we'll just say fair? It sounds fair.
All right. So option.
I don't blame you. We've ruined democracy for the whole world. The United States has.
We'll go there.
You know what? You know what the problem with democracy is, by the way? Everybody gets to vote. Oh shit.
Well, but this way we don't actually have a ballot. We can just pretend that the loudest cheer was the one we want to talk about. So
well, most people who aren't deaf will probably be able to figure it out. But go ahead, try whatever you want to try.
All right. So option number one: did Stone Cold Steve Austin really refuse to put Triple H over for his first world title at SummerSlam '99? If you want to hear that, make some noise. Okay.
Moving on.
I'm the only one who remembers that, apparently. Shawn Michaels got beaten up in a bar in Syracuse, New York. What really happened? You want to hear that? And finally, what is the real reason, if there is one that you know of, why Macho Man Randy Savage is not in the WWE Hall of Fame? I think we have a winner.
How about if I do a little of both of those last two? Because I got to tell you, once again, with Randy Savage, and everybody knows what the rumor is, there was some illicit business going on between him and Stephanie. All I can say, and believe me, I'm not one to not knock somebody if they deserve it. However, at the time that this was alleged to have gone on, we never heard anything about this. I never heard it until years after the fact when it was talked about on the internet as this big rumor. I remember when Savage left, I actually was the guy that filled in for him. When he left, he was doing the color on Raw, and I was suddenly pressed into service for a number of weeks on the sperm of the moment, as Kenny Bolin would say. Because he didn't know that Randy was going to leave, but Randy left. He left under, kind of bad circumstances in that professionally. He took the Slim Jim sponsorship with him. And, Vince is a guy who, for all the times that he wants to bring somebody back into the fold after they've sued him or fucked him or whatever, just so that he can prove he's the bigger man, that struck him wrong with Randy. And a team of psychiatrists could work for years on Vince McMahon, and I end up the psychiatrist would be in the fucking nut house and Vince would be unchanged. But I never heard that, and I've never heard anybody that was there, as Dennis Condrey would say, to see the dick in the pussy. I've never heard that from any credible source. I can't say that it's not true because I wasn't there, but also have no evidence of it whatsoever besides the spurious rumors on the internet. So that's kind of a downer of a story. However, Shawn Michaels getting his ass kicked by... I told you he couldn't whip cream with an outboard motor, right? In a real fight, Shawn Michaels is not going to win shit. As a matter of fact, I think he'd probably lay down for a paraplegic and a fucking nursery school girl. But he came out and told the story. Who remembers how many Marines it was? Was it 9 Marines? 6, 9? Well, it depends on how many times he told the story, because it keeps... One Marine. There were a bunch of Marines in a group, but it didn't take all of them. What happened was Shawn was being his normal self, pissing off everybody in sight. He was out at a bar. He was with Sean Waltman and Davey Boy Smith, and I know this, and they were breaking kayfabe, of course, because that's how little that Shawn especially respected the business. And I hate to say it about Davey, too, but he shouldn't have been there. But they were supposed to be big enemies, but at the same time, they were out at a bar. Everybody was inebriated. Probably Davey was in the best shape, because he can handle his liquor. But they got a 2-door rental car, a hire car, as they call them over here. And Davey got in the back seat first. And the seat came back, and it's a 2-door thing, not a 4-door, so he's kind of back there. And Michaels had been mouthing off like he usually did because he thought he was a big star and a celebrity and always wanted to piss everybody off, let everybody know he's there. And the Marines took exception to this, and from what I heard, one Marine really took exception and decided to catch him getting in that fucking car and tell him which way the fucking sun came up in the morning. And poor Waltman's asleep in the front seat while this is going on. Davey is stuck in the back seat. He can't get, world's strongest man, he can't get the fucking seat unlatched, right? What the fuck? He's trying to get at, if it had been Davey and Shawn against 6 Marines, we'd have been talking even. But it was Shawn against 1 Marine, and he got his fucking clock cleaned. And then he came back, and of course, well, it was 8 of them, or 6 of them, or 14 of them, or I don't know, they had a buzzsaw, I'm not sure, I can't remember. But the whole problem was, as Jim Ross says, nothing, his father used to say, nothing good ever happens on the streets after midnight. Shawn Michaels was at a bar, running his dick liquor at 2 o'clock in the morning to the wrong guy, and he got his shit pasted for it, and he deserved it. So that, I'm entirely happy to relive over and over again in the time tunnel.
All right, if I can paraphrase Lance Storm, I want to be serious for a minute here. Obviously, a lot of the guys you've mentioned tonight are people who are no longer with us. Not that, I don't want to be as tasteless as to ask you to rank the importance to you, but which of those wrestler deaths would you say have hit you hardest, and why?
Well, obviously, it's never good when you hear that news, and anymore it's gotten in wrestling, and that's another thing. I just think that wrestling has had so much bad publicity, and some of it has been self-inflicted wounds, and others been just happenstance. But it's never good when you hear stuff like that. And now, over the past several years, every time somebody in the wrestling business says to somebody else, "Did you hear about so-and-so?" That's the prelude, right? It's never, "Did you hear about so-and-so, they won the lottery," or so-and-so, they bought a new house. It's so-and-so, it's something bad. A lot of guys I worked with, a lot of guys that I considered friends, but I think the one that hurt me more than anybody else's was Ray Traylor's, was the Big Boss Man's, because not only did we work together for so long, but we were friends. I mean, in the 80s, I was married to my first wife. His wife was friends with my first wife, and we traveled everywhere together. And Bubba, he was a fun guy to be around. It did not take any effort at all to like Bubba, and that's what we always called him. Nobody ever called him Ray anymore after he got the gimmick. And it was especially bad because he had come up to OVW as an assistant trainer. WWF had booked him up there, and we'd got a chance to reconnect a little bit, and it was in 2004, because it was right before that Dennis Condrey moved back from Colorado to Alabama and started getting involved in wrestling again, just in some of the legend shows, and we had booked some of the midnight reunions, and Bubba would have been a part of that. And it would have been so cool after all those years to see Dennis and Stan and Bobby and me and Bubba all together doing the autograph sessions and the wrestle reunions and stuff. And we just heard one day that, he got home, wasn't really feeling great, but was tired, going to watch some TV on the couch, and went to sleep, and his wife found him, the next morning he was still in the same place and just hadn't woke up. And I think that was he was younger than me, and he was a friend of mine as well as somebody that we worked with. And just, for him, he was just like a big kid. He was like an American version of Owen Hart or Davey. He was a big kid and just liked to have fun with people, and had been a great talent that had really picked the business up and performed at a high level. And, even though his active in-ring career was winding down, he would have had a whole new career and life at these reunions and autograph sessions and fan fests, and he never got to do that. It was just a couple months, before we really started getting into that he passed away. So that to me was Chris Candido was not easy at all, because he was young enough to be my son, and I'd really given him his first job in a territory. He'd been wrestling since he was 15, but Dennis Corluzzo, my old friend from New Jersey who passed away about 14 years ago from a heart attack. Dennis had discovered him and always said, "Hey, if you can do something with Chris," and that's how Chris and Tammy came to Knoxville. I wanted to do something for Chris because he was a great kid and loved the wrestling business. So that, and for just such, just a stupid reason, just a blood clot. What the fuck? It wasn't like that he did it to himself. He did it to himself because he loved the wrestling business so much that he wasn't even going to let surgery on his leg stop him, and he was going to fly back home, and he was going to make his dates if he had to wear a cast and all that stuff. And shit just happens. But Candido was tough. Bubba was probably the toughest. But it's not, none of them are easy. And I don't want people to get on the internet and say, "Well, he glossed over so-and-so's death because it didn't touch him that much." Everybody's did. But those were people that were close to me, because Candido was kind of like, a protege, and Bubba was a close friend as well as, somebody I worked with. So thank you for bringing everybody down. Give me a knife, I'll cut my fucking throat here.
All right, let's thank you for talking about that, but let's move on to something that you like to get a bit more fired up about. It's a non-wrestling subject, but I know you have very strong views on American politics. Now, just yesterday, right, Piers Morgan, a fellow Brit, has been fired. What did I tell you would happen?
Vatakant! Dave was telling me in the car, because I said, "I like Piers Morgan." He's, "Oh, no," because I didn't realize he was a heel here. No, I didn't, because talk about reinventing yourself and coming up with a new gimmick. We didn't know about the sun or the mirror?
Mirror, yeah.
The mirror. We didn't know about the mirror. We didn't know about all this stuff. All of a sudden, this British newscaster with the pleasing British voice, because, you guys can say, "Fuck you, you fucking fuck," and you sound so dignified, right? But he shows up on our television, CNN hires him, and, he's doing, ratings 2 million viewers, for his show every fucking night. And, and he's not a conservative. He's a liberal over the United States. And, you know, I kind of liked listening to him, although I listen to MSNBC News because they're the real liberals. And also, they're more fun to just listen to instead of those old white guys that look like they've had strokes on Fox News going, well, then the stock market is going to be ruined if we give these poor people any food. But then all of a sudden, after the Newtown massacre, everybody's heard of, I'm sure, Piers Morgan started really getting heavy into gun control. And that's something you don't need to talk about in the United States because even the liberals, for some reason, still think the goddamn Constitution, which was written 200 and some years ago, is flawless. Even though all we had was muskets. Yes, you have the right to keep and bear all the fucking muskets you want. But the semi-automatic assault weapons, the AK-47s, we'd prefer you keep them out of school, right? But here's another thing. Piers Morgan, he didn't realize this about America. Even when we don't do shit right, and there is a lot of shit we don't do right, we can't take hearing about it. So he would say, well, we had this happen in London, and we changed the law, and we did this. Oh, now you're talking about you guys are better than us? Well, fuck you, you English bastard. Because that's something that the Americans are not going to have is being pointed out when somebody does something better than them. Even though there's health care better in many countries in the developed world, and there's gun control better, and there's a lower murder rate, and there's a higher education rate, and et cetera, we don't want to hear it as long as it's not in America. At least many of us. So Piers Morgan's ratings are down to fucking 250,000 people now instead of 2 million, and CNN fired him. He has the stink of ratings death on him. I'm thinking he'll probably show up on TNA Wrestling next week. But it does bring up, you know, once again, I've told everybody since I've been over here, you guys, you've been so nice to me and you're so pleasant and you're so personable. There's so much difference between, I love the United States. It's my country. I'm not knocking it, but I will admit some of its faults. And some of its faults are half our politicians are Republican, and that means they're as nutty as a fucking rainbow trout in a car wash. And this Constitution thing drives me crazy because like the muskets, they still think that we should have the ability for the citizens to band together and have a well-regulated militia. This was back when, in 1776, half of the citizens in our country were living in log cabins out in the woods, and they were in danger of being scalped and eaten by the fucking Indians. You guys were building giant cathedrals. I don't think at this point that we need a well-regulated militia in the United States unless all of you have some secret plot to get on a boat, come over, and take your shit back. But yet, they want to keep the guns. They want to keep us away from the health care. The Republicans are all about how can we keep the poor people down, because after all, the poor people will cause problems if you let them know that they're poor and they don't have any rights. So the Republicans say, we want all the people to have their rights, the rights of the Constitution. They want you to have rights unless you're black, unless you're Hispanic, unless you're gay. Actually, a state has just voted that you can discriminate against gay people if they come in your store and that you don't want to serve them because they're gay. Because one thing also about Americans, they want to make sure that they do what God wants, even though God is not currently a United States taxpayer. Here's another thing. If you're a woman, they don't want you to have your rights, right? Because they want to control birth control. They don't want to give you birth control on your health plan because, after all, you're mitigating God's will if you keep from getting pregnant. They want you to get pregnant every time you get fucked, so that way you'll have 18 kids, and then they can complain about you trying to get welfare to feed the 18 kids that you have because you got pregnant, because they wouldn't give you any birth control. Do you see why the Republicans give me gas? So they want to tell the women what to do with their pussies, possibly because they're not getting enough of it at home. But all in all, I don't blame people in foreign countries and in other countries. I shouldn't say foreign, international. That was Ted Turner's thing. They banned the word foreign. There's no foreign, it's international. So the wrestling announcers had to say he used an international object. But I don't blame people in other countries for thinking that we're all nuts because we act like it. But I just want you to know that only about half, and actually a little bit less than half now, are really nuts. They're just the loud wacko nuts. And after all, it's not the quiet people you're supposed to watch. Everybody said, oh, we got to watch the quiet ones. The quiet ones, no. The quiet one sitting over in the corner reading a book, don't watch him. Watch the fucking goof coming in with a chainsaw saying, I'm going to murder everybody in the place. Him's the guy you got to watch, right? So it's less than half now. The liberals, the progressives are getting over a little bit better and better all the time. And the conservatives are slowly dying off of crotch rot and fucking wheeze disease. And pretty soon we will actually join the modern country, and we will give people health care, and we will not care whether they're gay or whether they don't want to get pregnant or whether they're of a different color or possibly if they come from a different country. Then all we'll care about is we still can't figure out how to be as polite as you fucking people are. Even your road signs, please give way, states, fucking yield. I swear to God, we came out of a store in London first night I was there. What is it? Oh, it's his alarm. He goes to sleep during these long rants. It said, please be considerate of the neighbors, and if leaving the store between the hours of 10 p.m. and 5 a.m., please exercise due caution and keep the noise to a minimum. In the States, it's be quiet. In New York, it's shut the fuck up. So there are differences. It's taken me a long time to figure out how to work the shower nozzles. I still can't get the idea of driving on the other side of the road, and I'm panicked all the time. But you guys are very polite. You're very cultured. It shows that you're a 1,000-year-old society, and we were still out fucking beavers in the fucking ass in the 1700s. So I hope you will give us a little bit more time to come up to fucking modern standards before you just say, those goddamn Americans need to be put behind a fucking fence. And I hope you still don't hold a grudge because we stole some of your shit, because after all, at least you can take comfort in the fact that we're trying as hard as we can to fuck up what we took. So,
all right, we got time. We have time for one final question. Ben, where are you? Ben?
Seeing as though you're completely petrified of flying, will you ever come back?
Well, small smattering of chant there. I tell you, and everybody's heard about it. I haven't been on a plane in 10 years. And my wife has always wanted me to bring her over here, and she's actually, like I said, back in London riding the ferry up and down the Thames. I did Xanax myself for the trip, so I don't remember a lot of it. That makes it a really good trip on the plane. But since I've been here, I'm knocked out. I love the architecture. I love the countryside. Everybody, all the audiences have been great to me. Like I said before, there's not often at this point in my life, and with what I've done in wrestling, I get to do something for the first time and feel good about it. And this 2 weeks has been that experience. So we said once in a lifetime. I know Cena and Rock did it twice, okay? But it's not like I'm going to suddenly become a world traveler and I'm going to be a regular here and you're going to see me in 3 months. But I would very much like to come back. I have enjoyed myself tremendously. You guys and the audiences that we've had have been part of that. And even if I come back just to do sightseeing, there's so much more I want to see, but I've enjoyed it. It's an experience. It's something that I will never forget for the rest of my life. And I thank you for your hospitality and your friendship. It's made an impression on me. That's hard to do with my crusty old ass these days. And in the words of some famous general who I can't remember because I dozed through that part of school, I shall return. I promise you that. Thank you very much.
Well, Jim, let me say sincerely on behalf of everyone at Wrestle Talk, it's been an honor and a privilege to have you this past week. Ladies and gentlemen, he is a living legend, Mr. James E. Cornette.
Thank you guys very much. I appreciate it.